Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Into the Blue in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 16. Rhea stirs in her sleep before her eyes start to flicker open, her gaze landing on the king. "You're awake," Dmitri says. "Good." She only grunts in response, attempting to sit up on the bed. "You must not make such movements," he warns her. "The healers said that you have not fully recovered yet." "That does not matter," she mutters, clutching onto her waist. "We have to find Nemesis at once." "Hold it there, Lady Rhea," Claude comes into the room. "We're not ready to battle him just yet. Not with you all injured like this. We have bring you back to Garreg Mach and explain the situation. I'm sure the church is worried sick right about now." Rhea lays her head back on her pillow with a heavy sigh. A thin film of sweat still overrides her body. "You two are staring at me like you have something to ask." Rhea pants. "You might as well do so while I have nowhere to go." Claude frowns. "We're sorry to interrupt your rest. But you're right. There are some things that we absolutely must ask you. It seems I do not have much time left. I do not intend to hide anything any longer." Dmitri only watches her in silence, patiently waiting for the answers to unfold. Claude gulps. "You're the Immaculate One, aren't you? If what I'm thinking is correct, that's what the children of the goddess is referring to. In other words, you dash." Rhea nods. "I am the last child of the progenitor god. A long time ago, the progenitor god came from somewhere far away and descended upon this continent. She changed her form to resemble that of a human, and gave her own blood to birth her children. The progenitor god and her children shared knowledge and skills with the people of the land. Together, they built a prosperous civilization. But the humans turned their backs on the teachings of the progenitor god and engaged in senseless wars. Eventually people began to think of themselves as gods and challenged the progenitor god herself to battle. The land was scorched in the war that ensured, and the majority of humans were annihilated. I believe that those who slither in the dark are the descendants of those who retreated beneath the ground during that time. So they had been waiting all that time for their chance at revenge." Dmitri mutters. "It took the progenitor god an astonishing amount of time to revive the ravaged world." Rhea continues. "But eventually, the continent found peace again, and the progenitor god, having fulfilled her duty, fell into a long slumber in the Holy Tomb. The children who stayed behind built a settlement in Xanadu to protect the Holy Tomb as they quietly lived out their lives. But then, Nemesis appeared, bringing tragedy along with him. I was never able to forgive those who proudly wielded weapons crafted from the corpses of my brethren. I was the only survivor of Xanadu, and all I could do was wander across Fodlan clinging to my desperate desire for revenge. I called myself Ceros, fostered the founding of the empire, and prepared to oppose Nemesis and his followers." Dmitri and Claude exchange looks. "Let me get this straight." Claude holds out his hand, processing his astonishment. "Saint Ceros, is you? You're kidding me, right?" Rhea is about to respond, but an Alliance soldier enters the room in haste. "Your Majesties," the soldier says. "We're receiving a constant stream of express messengers from cities to the east. They claim that an unidentified military force is attacking and that there have already been a large number of casualties." "What?" The two kings gasp in unison at the news. "The reports indicate that the cities and towns along the East Gronder thoroughfare in the old Hrym territory have already been destroyed. Some villages were razed completely, leaving no survivors." "Damn it!" Claude curses. "Did they come from Shamhala? Could it be that there were some remnants of that wicked group hiding there?" "Your Majesties." Hilda hurries in next. "Updates are coming quick. The unidentified military force has crossed the Great Bridge of Murden. Alliance forces met them in battle, but it seems they have already broken through. They've already made it so far." Claude shakes his head in disbelief. "Is Count Gloucester unharmed?" "The Count is fine, but apparently my brother joined with reinforcements and was gravely injured." Hilda winces. "You mean to tell me they easily got past a general as skilled as Holst? They say the enemy general has a weapon that resembles the sword of the Creator. Even my brother was powerless to stop him." "The sword of the Creator?" Dmitri repeats. But that's impossible. We currently safeguard it here in this very fortress. And how can there be two of those swords? The enemy forces are flying a banner bearing the crest of flames as they continue their march west along the Ermid River. The soldier says. We believe they're marching toward Gareg Mach. A weapon that resembles the sword of the Creator and a banner bearing the crest of flames. Rhea squirms. Considering that Nemesis obtained the blood of the progenitor god, it does not surprise me that this has come about. The blood of the progenitor god. Dmitri clutches onto his head. Are you telling me that he is yet another vessel of the goddess? From the blood of the progenitor god, Suthes, he acquired the crest of flames. Rhea confirms. From her bones and heart, he crafted the sword of the Creator. The heart of Suthes is the crest stone that was placed in the sword of the Creator. The same is true of the crests of the 10 elites and the other crest stones. They were born of the blood and hearts of the progenitor god's children. Those who slither in the dark created them. Stole them. Suthes never gifted that power to the humans. Dmitri frowns. But I don't understand. The sword of the Creator that Byleth wields doesn't have a crest stone. So how is she able to wield its full power? Rhea falls silent for a moment. The crest stone of the progenitor god dwells within her. The tension thickens within the room as an eerie silence hangs over it. After I battled with Nemesis as Saint Ceros, Rhea starts. I reclaimed the heart of Suthes. I wanted to use that heart to resurrect her. Even though I had to do some questionable things to achieve that goal, I wished to see Suthes, my mother, once more. Dmitri's blood starts to boil. She became a vessel because you placed her heart in her. Rhea lowers her gaze. I believed that if I could resurrect my mother, I could regain all that had been lost. I suspected that her body housed the consciousness of Suthes. Those suspicions were correct. And yet, she merely gave her her power and vanished. How could you? Dmitri growls. She never asked nor approved of such a thing to happen to her. The very thought of his beloved bodies tampered in the hands of Lady Rhea is enough for him to flinch in disgust. My dearest wish did not come true, she says, as if that can make him feel any better. But she did inherit the power of the progenitor god. That is why I chose her to eradicate those who slither in the dark. Fodlan's blood-stained history must end. Power? Claude asks. Just what kind of power are we talking about? What did Teach inherit? Rhea does not answer the question. Not when there is yet another bang on the door. I'm here, Margrave Gautier, Sylvain, barges into the room unannounced, urgency laced in his tone. Where's Ingrid? Dmitri walks out of the room, grateful for Sylvain's timing for him to get some fresh air. He spares him no greeting, guiding him in haste. Follow me. Dmitri guides him to the healing cot at the other side of the tower. Inside, Did attends to Ingrid, placing a batch of new towels in a basin of water by her side. The pair shifts their attention to the new guests. Sylvain. Ingrid gasps. Ingrid. Sylvain makes a beeline by her side, bringing her into his arms immediately. He lets out a sigh of relief, stroking her hair fondly. Thank the goddess you're okay. He mumbles, burying his face on her neck. I'm all right, Sylvain. Ingrid says, her voice muffled through their hug. You didn't have to come all the way here. Dmitri watches the pair. A pang of sadness hits his chest, yearning for a closeness that he's lost. How could I not? Sylvain lets go of her for a brief moment. For you to collapse like that, without any reason, scared me to death. We seriously need to get you to a healer again and get checked. Really, you don't have to worry. She smiles reassuringly. I just fainted and I had no injuries on me. Still, it would really help with my peace of mind. He shakes his head adamantly. You're not doing anything strenuous while I'm here. You're going to be flying with me. He looks at Dmitri. I'm glad to see that you also came out of it all unharmed, Your Majesty. Thank you, Sylvain. Dmitri says. Is everything all right at the kingdom? Honestly, we couldn't ask for better timing. Sylvain responds. Word's starting to spread that the queen has gone missing. Dmitri winces. I suppose it's to be expected. A few weeks has passed since her disappearance. Lords across the land are starting to become outraged. Sylvain shakes his head. Even worse, they're using this as an opportunity to finally protest against our policies and demand for a conference with you. A huge one at that. I know it's tough, Your Majesty, but I think it's best if you return to the kingdom. Dimitri shifts in place, conflicted with his next course of action. I can't go back just yet. Dimitri says. Not when those who slither in the dark are afoot. Those who slither in the dark. They're the ones responsible for Her Majesty's disappearance. Ingrid explains. We infiltrated their hideout in search for clues to her whereabouts. But now, it seems that a bigger enemy approaches us. Yes, Dimitri nods. Our presence is required in Garreg Mach. It is reported that they are heading there now. We need to provide our aid. Especially when she's still gone. His skin prickles at the thought, turning his body numb. He takes a breath, trying to regain his senses by shaking away the fearful thoughts that crowd his mind. Sylvain's look softens with sympathy. I understand. But it's best if we detour back to the kingdom first to prepare well for this battle. Felix is holding the fort while you're gone, so we have to bring this up to him and gather some reinforcements. You're right. Dimitri then glances at Ingrid. There are still so many questions, and I believe Lady Rhea can help us. Are you able to remember more details from when you fell unconscious? No, Ingrid says apologetically. All I remember are voices screaming at each other. It's difficult to recall what was said exactly. Regardless, this may be linked to what I saw. For it to happen at the same time, this is too uncanny to just call it a mere coincidence. Perhaps it's linked to the power Lady Rhea was talking about. He needs to prod for more answers later. Especially when there is so much more to unveil. Why is Nemesis alive? What does he have to do with Bylotha's disappearance? But first, he has matters to deal with in the kingdom. As he exits the room, he bumps into Claude and Hilda once more. Huh. What a magnificent tale. Claude starts. It's enough to make your head spin. Rhea's real identity is Saint Cyros. My flabber is completely gassed right now. And my big brother challenged Nemesis. Hilda says quietly. He knew he couldn't win. He just did it so that his friends could escape. He emerged from the battle with a terrible injury. It's a miracle he didn't die. Dimitri's gaze softens at her. I'm glad he made it. Yeah. Me too. She lowers her gaze. Dying to save someone else seems to defeat the purpose. I wouldn't do it. He's alive, and in spite of myself, I'm really proud of him. You wouldn't do it, huh? Claude offers a weak smile, rubbing her back comfortingly. Anyhow, you should be proud of him. Nemesis is no easy enemy to hold back. We have to stop him at once. Dimitri says. The faster we reach him, the faster we can find the answers we search for. And finally, bring her back home. Nemesis' army is a big one. As the informant has said, they are coming from both sides, crossing over Alliance and Kingdom territory. The Alliance will stop their forces in Myrddin first. Claude says, pursing his lips. Sorry, Dimitri. But under my command, the protection of my land comes first. Do not apologize. Defense of Garreg Mach and Faerghus is my responsibility. Dimitri says. The kingdom will deal with their army that approaches Garreg Mach. We can join forces afterwards. I promise, we will aid you once we deal with them on our side. For now, take care of yourself out there. It takes 4 days for Dimitri to return back to his home. 4 days until he sees the discord and unrest that happens around Fhirdiad. The people of the kingdom crowd around him upon his arrival with tear-stricken faces and unrestrained sobs. Where is the queen, Your Majesty? A townswoman cries. Is the queen really dead? Another one sobs. How could this have happened to her? This can't be. What do we do now? Dimitri winces. As their cries grow louder, so do the voices in his head, overlapping together that they become as one, indistinguishable in their reality. You can't save her. What kind of king are you? Where is she, Dimitri? Where is she? He rubs his temple to soothe the migraine that begins to grow. We must hurry back inside the palace, Your Majesty. Dida says, taking notice of his unease. My apologies. Dmitri weakly nods, letting him guide him inside. The doors of the castle close behind him, shutting out the voices, but not enough that he cannot hear their whines. Guilt overwhelms him for being unable to quell the fears of his people. Not when he has nothing tangible to show them of her safety. You're back. Footsteps echo on the marble floor, interrupting his thoughts. Felix eyes him down with his usual, steely amber gaze. Dmitri frowns. A lot must have happened since I left. News has spread of the Queen's disappearance. Felix grits his teeth. Especially with the havoc that wreaked in Goneril, the people have stirred into panic. We will have to ready the kingdom army at once. The enemy we face aim to journey towards Gareg Mach. Do you know who they are? I can update you while we prepare our forces. Ingrid adds. A lot has been revealed to us during our travel to Goneril. It's going to be a long story. But to summarize, they are an enemy that has planned vengeance against the Queen for a long time, and have caused great chaos to the kingdom for many years without us noticing. Fine then. Felix says. What a nuisance. Enemies we never knew of keep popping up left and right. The loss of Her Majesty is truly a great one. Dmitri grimaces. I apologize for leaving all of the public relations to you, Felix. Not when you have matters at Frildarius to deal with. Spare the apologies. Nothing is as big compared to this. Felix defends. This is our job. I suppose you're right. Dmitri says half-heartedly. Annette has been dealing with soothing the people, so there's no need to worry about that. But you have to deal with the lords. They expected your arrival today and await you in the forum. Those old folks don't know when to shut up. Felix clicks his tongue. Even Baron Dominic and Count Galatea are among those who protest. It's not going to be pleasant. Dmitri hums. Who they are matters not. I will attend these matters with the same disposition. They've overstayed their welcome, that's for sure. Now that you're here, I suggest you send them back to where they came so they can do something that's actually productive other than sit around and complain. Dmitri gives his friend a weary smile. I will. Thank you for your help, Felix. The grouchy Duke only huffs before leaving to ready the kingdom army. Dmitri walks to back gardens of the kingdom palace where the forum is and greets the attendant. The attendant lets out a rather obvious sigh of relief at the sight of his king and rushes over to the forum. The king has arrived. He announces. Please rise. When Dmitri steps behind the podium, he realizes then that Sylvain did not exaggerate when he said it would be a huge conference. Majority of the viscounts, barons, dukes, and marquis gather around, chattering amongst themselves. Dukes Itha and Karen. Marquis Erebus. Counts Duval and Geraint. Viscounts Clymen, Brennius, Enid, Gideon, and Matthias. And as Felix mentioned, even Baron Dominic and Count Galatea are within their midst. The crowd falls into silence as soon as they notice Dmitri within sight. They raise from their seats, bowing cordially at his arrival. Good afternoon, he greets as they take their seats. He reads each of their somber expressions. I thank you for coming all the way to Fhirdiad. I'm sure you heard the news surrounding the Queen. Heard. Viscount Matthias spits. It was practically shouted from above. The story of her disappearance is never ending. Let alone, the injuries sustained by the Knights of Syros and of the former Archbishop herself. Marquis Erebus scoffs. Neighboring houses around Goneril territory have eyes and ears everywhere, you know. Did you really think you can hide this from us? Viscount Brennius accuses. Dmitri sighs quietly. He should have expected a peaceful discourse would be virtually fruitless with them. I'm sure His Majesty had his reasons. Count Galatea is the first to speak up in support of the king. It would do no good to stir the whole of Fodlan into panic. And what good did it do? Viscount Clymen retorts. The Queen is still missing, perhaps even dead, and a mysterious enemy runs rampant. They attempted to take down all of our territories. Count Geraint adds. Everyone, please, settle down. Dmitri urges, shaking his head vehemently. We must attempt to calm ourselves. He continues to speak before they can further protest. We are taking the necessary course of action to retrieve her at once. This newfound enemy is key to her rescue. We have to gather our combined forces and act immediately. Do you know who this enemy is? Baron Dominic asks. Yes. They go by the name Those Who Slither in the Dark. They are now under the command of Nemesis, the King of Liberation. Nemesis. Duke-Itha's eyes widen at the name. Surely, you're joking. Viscount Kleiman jolts up, pointing a finger at the king. This is insanity. Dmitri shoots him a look. I assure you, I only speak the truth. Those Who Slither in the Dark, what kind of juvenile name do you speak of? Viscount Gideon sputters. Quiet yourselves. Viscount Enid complains. She stares back at Dmitri with a skeptical yet concerned look etched on her face. Regardless, we will have to aid at once. We can't afford to lose our ground after everything we've done to rebuild the kingdom's prosperity. Still, if this is Nemesis we speak of, this will be a trying battle indeed. Baron Dominic hums. I'm sure he will be a strong foe to fight against. Wasn't it in the tale that he wielded the sword of the Creator? Yes. Dmitri nods solemnly. Therefore, we have to gather the most elite among our soldiers. Their main forces are heading for Gareg Mach. While we station our final line of defense there, we need to keep a front at Karen to slow down their movements and reduce their numbers. Duke Karen laughs in disbelief. Dmitri scowls. Is there something funny, Duke Karen? The Duke shakes his head exasperatedly. How presumptuous of you to think that I will allow you to lead them to my domain. He stares incredulously at the king. Do you really think I will if we are unable to keep the Suttungers mystery in our possession? Dmitri shakes his head. Can we not stray from the main conversation dash? But it is a crucial part to this main conversation, Your Majesty. He replies firmly. I have warned you before. You were so adamant to reclaim the relics back for the church to seal. But look at us now. It is what we have feared all along. Yet another enemy has emerged to destroy our lands. One who wields the sword of the Creator, no less. And you still believe we can fight without the power of the relics? Do you still think that we should trust the Queen? He bellows. Don't make me laugh. These relics prove necessary for us, after all. Those silly policies of yours should be abandoned. Invasion after invasion will continue to come. How else can we protect ourselves? The lords murmur in agreement that it makes Dmitri freeze in place. I understand your vision, Your Majesty, Count Galatea frowns. After all, I supported your policies. Until now. I'm afraid I must agree with Duke Karen on his stance. Count Galatea, Dmitri gasps. I second that, Your Majesty. Baron Dominic raises his hand without much fervor. We are putting the livelihoods of the people on the line. The relics were given to us by the goddess for a reason. To protect our homes. Those with crests have this duty. Whether we like it or not. Dmitri clenches his hands into fists. This isn't what we stand for. Dmitri mutters. For years, he fought against the usage of relics alongside Byleth and the Blue Lions. They have witnessed their power, and how it touches the darkness of their hearts. Crests were bestowed upon by the goddess as a gift. Byleth told him once. But not relics. Relics were made for the sake of fighting human wars. They feed on the hatred within our hearts, until our minds finally become corrupted. She stared at the sword of Creator and Eredbar that laid in front of them. We do not need them anymore during these times of peace. We have to find other ways to protect the people. But these relics, Dmitri frowned. They have protected us for centuries. How could they actually hold such a dark mystery? We've been brought to believe that they're necessary. To keep those with crests in power. But they're not. Byleth let out a small smile. Nemesis was defeated without the use of a relic, did you know that? I did not. He blinked in surprise at this fact. And we defeated many others without the relics on our side. Byleth's smile remained. It was not the power of our weapons, but the skill of our people that allowed us to emerge victorious during the war. Felix. Didu. Ingrid. Sylvain. Mercedes. Annette. Ash, the combined might of our friends is what makes us win. I'd like to think, it is by being around those we love that fuel our motivation, rather than the need for power. And in this time of peace, I hope that we can strive for a day where we do not need it anymore, and can seal these away for good. Dmitri remembers her words, ingrained so deeply in his memory. It's one of the many things she has told him that he knows is carved into his heart for eternity. So, when he speaks to the Lords once more, it is filled with conviction. I'm afraid we cannot do that, he answers. Our policies will still remain. We are to reclaim the relics and seal them once and for all. The Lords raise their voices once more, chanting in protest. You are asking for the death of the kingdom. Duke Itha yells. How foolish of you! Marquis Erebus cries. Silence! Dmitri bellows. The Lords grow quiet immediately as his roar echoes around the forum. He exhales. These relics were never needed to protect our lands. They are not the reason we stand with pride as one kingdom. It has always been because of our motivation to protect the people, to serve our respective duties. He stares each and every one of them in the eye. And if my words are not suffice enough to prove this to you, then I shall surrender Eredbar in this fight. I will defeat Nemesis without the use of a relic. The only sound that can be heard in the forum now is the breaths held at the king's declaration. He doesn't know what triggers the memory, but his wedding vows somehow come to mind. We promised we will put the kingdom first, he says. And this is how we will do it. We will show you that the kingdom's strength can be realized without resorting to such power. You may call me a fool if you wish. But if we are to achieve victory in this fight, my hope is that can prove to you that we rely on your strength as a people, not as weapons for war. The Lords exchange looks. Viscount Enid is the first to speak. You are a fool, she says matter-of-factly with a slight shake of the head. But I suppose I can agree to these terms. Her look softens. I do not hold a crest myself. I believe that this can do good for those who do not possess one, let alone wield a relic. So I will stand by you, your majesty. Viscount Enid, Dmitri's eye widens. I will too, Baron Dominic says. Albeit my bloodline has always possessed the crest of Dominic, I have seen my niece's conviction in support of these policies. And perhaps this is finally my chance to atone for having yielded to Cornelia during the war. That is more than I can ask for, Baron Dominic, Dmitri smiles. Thank you. I was never against your policies, your majesty, Count Galatea adds. But you must acknowledge the validity of our concerns. That I do. Dmitri nods. That being said, my daughter and her husband also believe strongly in your policies. Should you be able to emerge victorious and offer your protection successfully without the aid of the relics, it will shift the sentiment of the crest system dramatically. I pray that the odds will be in your favor. One by one, more lords start to vote in favor for Dmitri's ultimatum. Duke Itha, Marquis Erebus, Counts Duval and Geraint, and Viscount Brennius are the next to follow suit, voicing out their meek support hesitantly. Finally, Duke Karen sighs. There is no point convincing you, is there? He frowns. If that is the case, I believe I cannot aid in this battle, your majesty. Duke Karen, Dmitri utters. Our house does not hold much power to hold against a force as strong as them. And if our foe is Nemesis as they say, our numbers and strength are far too inferior to hold the first line of defense. Even the Suttungers mystery will be of no use. He slumps his shoulders in weariness. Though this may only prove your point. The relics are useless if its wielder does not hold the might nor the resolve needed to stand tall. However, I can propose this. Magdrid Way is clear of any neighborhoods and homes of our people. It would be best to reroute the enemy there in their approach to Garag Mach rather than infiltrating through my territory. If we are to take this course of action, I can bring in some soldiers of House Karen to aid you. Dmitri's breath hitches. For so long, House Karen has been an adamant opposer of his policies, especially of his union with the Archbishop. To finally sway him, even by the slightest, is enough to fill him with motivation. Thank you, Duke Karen. Dmitri smiles. Combining your forces with ours will surely help protect our lands. The air in the forum shifts, turning into something more optimistic. But expectantly, there is pushback. This is ridiculous. Viscount Clyman shouts. As if I will agree with such a thing. Not all of us are as powerful as you. You may be able to win, but that proves nothing of our protection. Exactly. Viscount Matthias adds. This is all a ploy to further suppress our power, isn't it? The Queen plays you like a puppet. Do not speak ill of the Queen. Baron Dominic warns. I knew that her reign would cause problems. Viscount Gideon hisses. Her disappearance is the price she pays for wanting to seal away all the relics. She always wanted to take full control of our lands. Viscount Clyman continues. We're warning you. Count Galatea yells. The lords fall into argument once more, shouts piling on shouts, all in mentioning of the Queen. Silence. Dmitri roars. And once more, they listen, growing quiet from his admonishment. Dmitri's glare hardens at the Viscount trio who spoke ill of his wife, for they have always been the most obnoxious amongst all the lords. And now, he sees why. Viscount Gideon, Viscount Clyman, and Viscount Matthias. He says lowly, approaching the three. You were under Cornelia's counsel, were you not? What does this have to do with anything? Viscount Gideon stammers, while the two only blanch at the question. It has been brought to my attention that Cornelia was in alliance with those who slither in the dark. Dmitri says. And it has also come to my knowledge that they were involved with my father's assassination. The lords gasp at the accusation, and the viscounts only stay speechless. You know of them, yes. Dmitri challenges. Do not be ridiculous. Viscount Matthias sputters. We would never dash. You remained complicit under her reign. Even now, many years after her passing, it is clear to me that your fealty with her still remains. His expression darkens as he glares at them. And I know what you whisper when my back is turned. Dmitri growls. The Queen is gone. The Archbishop is no more. It is finally our time to strike and reclaim our power. But let me be clear. The Viscounts tremble as Dmitri towers over them. As long as I still stand, the kingdom will not be yours to seize. You must count yourself lucky that I still seek your counsel at all. He walks back to the podium, recollecting his calm demeanor. The Queen will be rescued. I swear by it. And I expect that you all uphold your duties in the kingdom to make sure that Nemesis and his forces do not pass through. I'm counting on you all. He concludes. We have been through enough battles. It is time to finally grant the people peace. He nods at the attendant, stepping away from the podium. Everyone, rise. The attendant says. The lords rise and bow before him, sealing their duty and ultimately, the king's promise. Dmitri locks eyes with one of the commanders at the front lines. Your Majesty. Ash salutes. Ready for battle? You and Ingrid have the same problem in being too formal. Dmitri smiles lightly. Oh, is that so? Ash chuckles abashedly. But it's our job to be exemplary knights to the Faerghus army. As you wish. Dmitri scans around the troops. Speaking of, where is she? Sylvain brought her to a cleric immediately upon their arrival. Ash explains. They must still be there if they haven't returned yet. Felix and Dida join them, passing through the crowds of soldiers. The army is ready, Your Majesty. Felix says. We can move out on your command. Good. Thank you, Felix. I'm in too, by the way. Annette pops up from behind, waving cheerfully at him. Annette. When did you get here? I just arrived this morning. She giggles. The kingdom needs all the help it can get after all. And I gotta show you that House Dominic is by your side, especially after the little show my uncle put at the forum this morning. She pumps both her fists in encouragement. And as if we will leave all of it to you in finding Her Majesty. She was our professor too, you know. That's right. Dmitri nods. It means more than you know to find that she is cherished by so many of you. She is waiting for us. Dida says. I just know it. Now then, we must get ready. Dmitri smiles. We can't keep her waiting. Not so fast. Sylvain chuckles, joining them with Ingrid by his side. Sylvain. Ingrid. Is everything all right? Yes, more than okay. She nods. But, we've come here to ask for your permission. If I may, we would like to request for our leave from this battle. Dimitri's ears perk up at her uncharacteristic request. May I know the reason for your leave? Ingrid blushes. I just finished an appointment with one of the kingdom's trusted clerics. And, they found out something after all. She clears her throat. Well, what is it? Dimitri asks, curiosity ever growing. I'm with child. She says, her face reddening all the more. The blue lions gasp at the fact. Oh my gosh. Annette squeals. Congratulations. This is wonderful news. Ash barely suppresses his tears. Congratulations to you both. Dida graces them with one of his biggest smiles. Another one. Felix smirks, shaking his head amusingly. This is the biggest boon I've heard in a while. Dimitri grins at his friends fondly, his heart swelling with joy. Congratulations, you two. Don't tell me you're gonna have another son. Felix sighs. I don't want another mini Sylvain running rampant around the kingdom. Well, I really want to have a daughter for our second child. Sylvain gushes. She's just going to be the cutest. Looks like Unky Faye will have more kids to babysit. Quit it. Felix groans. Tell me, when will you and Annette finally get a kid of your own? I don't want my children to be lonely, you know. We are trying, Annette stutters. Let's not have this conversation here. Felix blushes furiously. Anyways, this is about you today. Dimitri watches the group chatter in bliss at the joyous news. And as Dimitri's heart is filled at the sight, the pang of sadness hits him once more, and the yearning for a closeness that he's lost returns. How he wishes that she's by his side to see them all together like this. Your Majesty, Ingrid brings him out of his daze, dragging him away from the group for a moment. My apologies, Ingrid. Dimitri smiles. Truly, I wish that we could celebrate in better circumstances. Ingrid shakes her head. There's no need to worry about that. It must have been difficult to deal with so much backlash at once. I don't think the lords gave you an easy time today. No, they did not. Dimitri frowns. The lords have always been against many of our policies. But, they tend to be more vicious towards the queen. He clenches his fist. It irks me how there is nothing I can do about it. She has done so much, yet, these nobles do not seem to budge from their preconceived notions. They always find a way to pin the blame on her. Ingrid holds his shoulder comfortingly. The nobles are too focused on their old ways. Besides, they are not the main people we should focus on. She looks over at the front doors of the palace. It's always been for the people, hasn't it? The people, they love you. And they love their queen. Your partnership and union together, it gives them hope. It's why they grieve so much for her disappearance. Ingrid, Dimitri stares at her in awe. You two are the reason why the kingdom has become stronger than ever. It has become a place where the people can finally live safely and be at peace. Ingrid's voice becomes soft as she gently caresses her stomach where a baby has begun to grow. I can't imagine what a world would be like without her as our queen. That makes the two of us. Dimitri whispers. I doubt a world without her would be a very good one. I know she's out there somewhere. Ingrid says. I can just feel it. That is why I believe we must do everything in our power to bring her back. And we all will be right by you as we do so, Your Majesty. Her words somehow lift a heavy burden on his shoulders, making his body feel light again. The voices, having clawed on his conscience earlier, dissipate, now being replaced by the warmth of his friends he surrounds himself with and his beloved's voice giving him a soft reminder. Dimitri smiles to himself. She's never wrong, isn't she? Ingrid peers at him. It's nothing. He shakes his head, though his smile remains. Thank you, Ingrid. Dimitri walks over to the front lines, rejoining the Blue Lions. We should get to it then. We must not stall any longer. Sylvain and I will remain here in the kingdom to manage the crises within the lands. Ingrid says. So please, do not worry. Your attendance is important at Garreg Mach, and it will do no good if you focus your efforts here. Plus, these policies are a huge chunk of my responsibility too. Sylvain agrees. I'll deal with the lords from here on out. You can count on me. I really am indebted to all of you. Dimitri says. That's no way a king should speak. Sylvain jokes. We share a duty to the kingdom too. You don't owe us any favors. You're right. Well then, Dimitri taps his lance, one coated in silver and engraved with the emblem of the Holy Kingdom of Faerghus rather than his usual Eredbar, onto the marble floor. Knights of Faerghus, he declares. We march on to Garreg Mach. The troops cheer as the kingdom banner rolls out and the palace gates open. Chapter 17. What can I say? Gerald smirks. You got us. You rolled right over us and took out our employer. I know when it's time to raise the white flag. The blue lions all exchange looks in stupor. Wait, that's it. Shay jaw drops. You're giving up. We've faced you in battle many times, only to be bested at every turn. Byleth agrees. Yeah, Gerald shrugs. You've pretty much run us out of business by now. It's not easy finding new clients in the best of times. And no matter how good our reputation is, none of it matters if we can't actually win. At this rate, I'll have to stop calling myself the Blade Breaker. In that case, what would you say to a new employer? Dimitri asks. The Holy Kingdom of Faerghus? We've crossed swords many times, and suffered great losses on both sides. Byleth shifts under his hardened glare, but it immediately relaxes as he looks at her. We surely bear some bad blood between us. But part of me wonders if we cannot put that gruesome history behind us. Assuming, of course, it was coin, not conviction, that brought you to the Empire's side. Geralt and Byleth exchange looks. Don't worry, Geralt says. Words like conviction aren't even in a merc's vocabulary. But if we do join up with you, I can't imagine there will be much avoiding the Knights of Syros. The problem is, me and the Archbishop have a bit of a past together. I'd prefer to keep my distance if I can. Dimitri nods. I'll remember that. The church has stationed themselves in the town of Camulus, within Bladdid territory. We'll be sure to keep you away from there, and I promise to warn you should Lady Rhea ever visit our encampment. His eyes widen. Ah, and I'll place you in a separate unit should we ever fight alongside the knights themselves. Are those conditions agreeable? We could use your strength among our ranks, if you're willing to join. Yeah, you should join us. Byleth is almost surprised with how the mercenary, who views her as his sworn enemy, beams at her. I mean, by now we all know firsthand how strong you are. And sure, there might be some folks here and there who have reservations about you fighting on our side. But they'll definitely come around once they see how dependable you are. Her father eyes her incredulously. What do you say? I doubt the Empire will have any jobs for us after all of this. No better time for a fresh start. I agree. Byleth smirks before looking at Eloise, gauging his sentiment one more time. And you, Eloise? It might be strange, being back on the same side as your old knight friends. Eloise nods, placing his hand on his chest resolutely. I've already made my decision. I have sworn to follow this fine captain wherever he goes. Besides, I'm sure my allies will welcome me back with well, not with open arms. They'll welcome me back with crossed arms. Geralt nods approvingly. Well, I guess that's that. Just tell us when we start. I'll go talk to the group and smooth things over. You two, stay here with the client. Understood, Captain. Eloise grins. Dimitri glances at his friends. We have a good bit of smoothing over to do on our end as well. Let's get to it. Byleth is unable to exchange any words with him as he marches away from them in a hurry. It pains her slightly as she realizes then how despite being on the same side, he still does not know who she is. Geralt holds her shoulder reassuringly, giving her a soft smile. Don't worry. Now that you're here, you can take your time. Time. She wonders just how much she has. As Byleth walks around the central plaza, she hears someone wailing from afar. When she turns to the sound, she sees a small girl dashing toward her at full speed. Bernadetta! Byleth's eyes widen. Byleth! Bernadetta continues to sob, throwing herself at Byleth, clinging onto her for dear life. Thank the goddess! We don't have to kill you. Byleth holds onto the weepy girl, patting her head. It's good to see you, Dash. It's By. More footsteps approach her. She turns to see the former Black Eagles, Dorothea and Petra, as well as the Ashen Wolves coming to greet her. Some she has spoken with in this reality, and some others still view her as a stranger. You're here, Byleth murmurs. They're all okay. It has been too long. Dorothea beams. The Empire. I know it isn't my place anymore to ask, but, how are they? Byleth shakes her head. You already know the answer to that, Dorothea. Most of you have yielded to the kingdom. Yes, but, Dorothea frowns. I worry for those who are left behind. Hubie, Ferdy, and Edie, oh, I just hope that they have each other. We must not be worrying, Dorothea. Petra tells her. We can only be looking forward now that we are allying with the kingdom. The princess looks at her with a smile. Still, it is a pleasure to be having you with us again, Byleth. Welcome to the club. Balthus grins, placing his hands behind his head. Looks like our little group of surrenders is expanding just nicely. Please do not call us that. Happy frowns. She exchanges looks with Byleth. I'm glad to finally meet you. Coco told me you looked out for her. Thank you. Really? It is not easy looking out for someone such as I. It makes me happier than you know. Despite what Constance says, her morose look remains on her face. Constance too, Yuri eyes her incredulously. I don't understand you. Nevertheless, the kingdom accepted you. I suppose I returned the favor somewhat. Byleth tilts her head. What do you mean? It's nothing. Yuri waves away dismissively. Anyway, we've greeted you with artillery reunion enough. About time the kingdom will make the rounds for our next mission. Byleth glances at the group. Somebody is missing. Where's Lindhart? She asks. He's talking things over with the kingdom on Hevering matters. Dorothea fiddles with her hands anxiously. This may be a win, but it's not easy to think of it that way for some of us. We're just pawns in the calamities of war. Constance says wearily. Bernadetta, who still hugs Byleth, tightens her hold around her. Somehow, I'm getting the shivers. Demon, a soldier calls her. The king requests for your presence. The air shifts into something more discomforting, shown with how Bernadetta quickly releases her, instead hiding behind Petra. Byleth holds the soldier's gaze. All right. She looks at the group, giving them a smile, hoping it's enough to break the tension. I'll see you later. The soldier guides her near the watchtower, where she sees her father already there interacting with the Blue Lions. Geralt is the first to turn to her. Good, you're here. We just finished signing the paperwork. The terms are simple. They'll be requiring our service until we reclaim Garreg Mach. Of course, an extension can also be requested should need be. She watches him carefully. And what of Lady Rhea? The terms already mention that we be stationed in a separate unit. Thanks for that, Your Majesty. Dimitri nods, a polite smile gracing his lips. I'm glad the contract is beneficial for the both of us. As Byleth looks at the group, her eyes widen as she notices Ingrid within their midst, who is now mostly healed as she stands without problem in her full armor. You're okay. Byleth blurts out. The Blue Lions all turn their heads at Ingrid. Oh, Ingrid looks at her in shock, and her face flushes slightly. Yes, I am. Thank you. Byleth only sighs in relief. She now scans more carefully at the Blue Lions who all stare at her in mixed ways. Annette and Ash both have their heads lowered as they look at her, while Dido looks at her head-on with his usual intensity. Mercedes offers a polite smile, in contrast to Sylvain's nervous one. And Felix, like his father, stare her down calculatingly. Not that it phases her, she always knew the Frildarius men to be as such, though Felix always was the more skeptical one. Then she sees Shay. Unlike his upbeat demeanor he had when she first relented, his face now wears a frown. As they lock gazes, his eyes only move to stare instead at his own feet. But Dimitri. As she looks at him, she can only think of how he looks at her like a stranger. None of that familiarity behind his smile can be found in the one he has offered her millions of times. To the Dimitri before her, she is only a mercenary, nothing more. Though she does find intrigue in his eyes, as his hair is tied and swept away to have them in full view. And in those eyes, despite the smile he gives her and the fact that he does not remember her, there is something comforting in his gaze that always pierces with intensity, staring deep into the windows of her soul. She blinks out of her daze as Dimitri clears his throat, averting his gaze away from her. Ash is the first to break the awkward tension. It feels strange standing here with the Blade Breaker and the Ashen Demon after all we've been through. We have fought so many times, Ingrid adds with a smile. I never expected we would end up on the same side. Those two gave us quite the struggle. Felix smirks. Byleth can read the look of excitement on his face despite how hard he tries to hide it. Perhaps he awaits for a friendly match. All the better that they're on our side now. I've got my own grievances, but the end result is a positive one. And whatever we may feel, this is His Majesty's choice. Dida says. Not everyone will be too happy about it, but let's all just try and get along, okay? Sylvain smiles before adding a wink to his statement. Though I'm sure the Ashen Demon being such a stunning beauty will soften the blow a bit. Unlike his usual confidence though, he immediately stammers as her and especially her father glare at him. Kidding, of course. I thought you had outgrown those jokes. Ingrid scowls. Why don't you do us all a favor and stay quiet? It'll be an honor teaming up with you. Annette beams despite her timid posture. Oh, and don't let me forget to introduce you to everyone later. I think we should start with a nice sparring session. Mercedes giggles. That's the Blue Lion's way, isn't it? Dimitri smiles at them. Indeed it is. I recall the same thing happening the last time we invited a mercenary into our ranks. We're happy to be here. Gerald says. He shoots a look at Byleth now, offering her a rare smile full of awkwardness, perhaps even nervousness. And, try to fit in, kid. She only nods, smiling back at him, wanting him to know of her appreciation of his help once more. We know all too well what you're capable of. Dimitri says. I'm glad such might will now be fighting for our cause, rather than against it. I'll start researching how best to incorporate Geralt and his mercenaries into our formations. Rodrigue says. From here, we plan to join up with the Alliance and the Church, then march on Garreg Mach as one unified force. I'll do what I must to ensure Lady Rhea doesn't come into contact with our new friends here. I appreciate it. Gerald thanks again. And what of our other mercenary friend? You've been awfully quiet. Rodrigue scans around. Where did they go? Byleth looks amongst them, now also realizing how Shay just disappeared. He must be scheming something. Suthies says. It would be in your best interest to stay on guard. Please forgive him, Dimitri frowns. He must still be having some reservations after all. It's fine, Dimitri. She says reassuringly. But to her surprise, the Blue Lions all gape at her, falling into silence. She merely blinks. Did she say something wrong? That's oddly too familiar. Felix's widened eyes now narrow into a stern glare. It's Your Majesty to you. If the atmosphere hadn't tensed up, Byleth would have laughed at the irony of Felix correcting her on his address. But she merely bows her head apologetically. She has to be more careful. My apologies. Your Majesty. No, that's quite all right. Dimitri waves his hands fervently. It's not an issue. He clears his throat again, and Byleth catches the small blush that dusts his cheeks. Anyway, why don't we set for the training grounds? Byleth takes a training sword from the rack, swinging it around and about. She looks at the Blue Lions as she sways back and forth playfully. Who wants to fight first? I'll go. Felix says with a sly smirk. He draws a training sword from the rack, readying his stance. I'd like to see what you got. Sword against sword. Don't hold back. Byleth twirls her sword, analyzing his posture. Seems like he is still as sturdy as she remembers him to be. Fine. She smirks back, rooting her feet onto the ground. Come at me. A thrill surges through her as he dashes toward her, striking his sword from below. She blocks it and steps back, but he does not miss a beat, throwing his next strike. She continues to take the defense, blocking turn after turn. But as soon as Byleth notices the man's uneven breathing, she roars as she finally makes her first blow. He blocks her, but he struggles for an advantage, pushing against her blade while her arms remain steady. He glares at her, but his determination shifts into shock when he sees a kick incoming to his side. He's pushed away from her and he gasps for air as he clutches onto his waist. The Blue Lions cheer in awe at the sight. Byleth readies her position once again. That all? She taunts. Felix takes the bait as expected. He deviously grins at her. My mind is emptied of all but the thrill of the challenge. He strikes again, taking the full offensive. His strikes are fast, but not as fast as when Byleth saw him at his peak during the war. He still has room to learn. She ducks, slashing her sword on the gravel floor, creating dust between the two. Felix grunts, shielding his eyes from the debris. You. That's so underhanded. Nothing's underhanded in a battle you wish to win. She lectures, slashing his sword at him. She manages a hit before Felix runs backwards to gain some ground, rubbing his eyes furiously. She rushes at him, ready for another strike, but Felix blocks it on time. He slashes now for her torso, so she leaps high into the air. Wrong move. Felix grins. He strikes again as she makes her landing, but she does a split on the ground, barely evading the sword that slashes over her head. No way. Felix sputters. How did you dash? In a second, she sweeps him off his footing and grabs a hold of his collar, pulling him to the ground. He tries to move his sword, but Byleth immediately swings at it, deflecting it away from his hand. She's on top of him now as she holds her blade against his neck. Byleth eyes him challengingly, but the man only sighs, raising his hands over his head. Fine. I yield. The Blue Lions cheer again, crowding around her. That was so cool. Annette squeals. Yes. It was amazing to watch. Mercedes agrees. Sylvain whistles. Defeated by such a beauty in less than a minute. What do you say to that, Felix? Felix huffs, crossing his arms. A rare, flustered look flickers on his face, which looks rather humble to his standard. You are no easy opponent to defeat. He admits. You certainly did not go easy on me. You fight like a mercenary, not a knight. I can learn a thing or two from that. He points his training sword at her. But know that I will beat you, and I will surpass your strength. I do not doubt that. She replies. You just have to find your hunger besides the pursuit of strength, is all. My hunger. Felix strokes his chin. I never really thought about that. I'm going next. Ingrid announces. Me too. Ash chimes in. I suppose I should as well. Dida smiles. Eventually, all the Blue Lions ask for a match against her, and she does so without hesitation, fighting them one by one. She beats every single one of them, but to her, her victory is not enough. She reverts to her old professor ways, giving them feedback after each fight. The thrill of teaching again, she didn't know how much she missed it. For some reason, bystanders have crowded around outside of the training grounds, watching each battle. At times, they even gave an applause. She would hear her nickname ever so often, commenting on her skill either in wonderment or in fear. She wipes the sweat away from her forehead, her stamina starting to deplete as she finishes her final duel with Didu. The sun has already begun to set. They've stayed at the training grounds for far too long. Hey, Your Majesty, you still haven't dueled with her. Sylvain says. Dimitri shakes his head. Oh, no, that is quite all right. Come on, it's tradition. Annette prods. It'll boost morale within the camp. I mean, look. Everyone is watching. Dimitri squirms, shifting in place at the stairs and pleading requests. Byleth only watches him expectantly, fiddling with her training sword. Eventually, he sighs. "All right. Give me a lance." The crowd shouts and hollers as the king of Faerghus moves to the middle of the training grounds, standing directly opposite of his foe. He stares at her with his usual, fierce gaze. "I do not expect you to go easy on me despite the people watching." "I will do no such thing," she replies. Byleth moves first, forcing him to take the defensive. She knows his strength is superior to hers, so she makes her strikes quick to prevent him from having any opening. Dimitri blocks her hits, spinning his lance before thrusting it at her. He manages to gain momentum, closing the distance between the two of them. As expected from His Majesty, one of the bystanders say, "Go, King Dimitri. Defeat the Ashen Demon." Another yells. The crowd's cheers grow louder, as the gap becomes shorter and shorter. In an attempt to save herself, Byleth ducks, slashing her sword through the gravel ground with such force that it creates dust between the two. Dimitri shields his eyes on time, turning away from her strike. The dust hangs between the two, clouding their view. "I can't see anything," someone yells. Dimitri scoffs. "You cannot use the same trick twice." Byleth smirks, picking a rock from the ground. "It's not the same trick." As soon as she sees Dimitri's silhouette within the dust, she throws the rock at him and starts circling around to his side. He splits the rock in two with his lance. Right after, he spins around, noticing how Byleth has already jumped and readied herself to slash down her sword at him. A distraction. He gasps in surprise. But he raises his lance in time. Before Byleth can retreat, he grabs a hold of her wrist, relying on his bare might instead to pull her down to the gravel floor. He straddles her, the handle of his lance pressing against her neck. The two grunt, fighting for the upper hand desperately. She struggles and flails about, trying to push the lance away from her, but he's always been too strong for his own good. That's when Byleth catches the look on Dimitri's face. It's a look filled with resolve, empty of bloodlust as he aims for a win. She knows it all too well. He wears it when he thinks of the people. Of the kingdom. She realizes it now. He has grown and she wasn't there to see it. Despite the bittersweet feeling that courses through her, she only watches him in awe, fully relenting from the battle as she relaxes herself. He still glares at her with determination. But it dissipates when he locks stares with her, shifting to widened eyes and an agape mouth. The hold on his lance loosens too, but Byleth does nothing to break free. All she can do is look. Somebody coughs and both fighters turn to see Rodrigue pressing his lips together, looking anywhere but at them. There's an awkward silence that fills the training grounds, until Sylvain breaks it with a teasing "Get a room." Dimitri jolts up at the comment, scrambling away from her. His face completely reddens. "My apologies." Byleth calmly stands up, brushing off the dust on her. "So," Ash mutters. "Is the fight still going on or?" "No." Byleth shakes her head, extending her hand toward him. He stares at it for a moment, eyeing it warily as if she would pull another one of her tricks. But after a while, when he sees that she does nothing, slowly and hesitantly, he places his hand in hers and she pulls him up. Byleth's eyebrows raise in amusement at how the redness on his face still hasn't disappeared. It's another familiar sight that tends to happen whenever he's around her. Usually, she likes to tease him about it, but she decides against it for now. Instead, she raises his hand up in the air with pride. The king of Faerghus has won. The crowd cheers, chanting his name with such joy as if they've just won the war. Byleth helps tidy up the training grounds, chattering with some enamored knights who follow her as she does so. She peers over at her side and sees Dimitri approaching her. "Demi, your majesty," she calls out. He gives her one of his polite smiles. "You fought well. I don't think I felt such thrill in a very long time. I am only relieved that you are now on our side." "Thank you," she says. "The same can be said to you. I see why you lead the people. You are too kind." Dimitri chuckles. "Still, it was a close battle. I don't think I ever saw you fight like you just did back when we fought on the battlefield. It is as if you held back all those times." His smile fades as he becomes deep in thought. This may be putting it bluntly, but I wonder if there is some ulterior motive. Before Byleth can even think of a response, he shakes his head. Never mind. Please do not mind me. You've had a long day. You just arrived here after all. Right, Byleth mutters. Well then, have a good evening, Dadash. His voice traces off for a moment. Forgive me for my rudeness, but I never asked for your name. Byleth's chest tightens, the reminder of her unfamiliarity swirling around her head again. Byleth, she says quietly, as if it were some secret. My name is Byleth. Byleth. Dimitri practices the name on his tongue, and a smile creeps upon his face. It's a wonderful name. Her whole body grows warm at the comment. I shall ensure that our forces are aware of how to address you, Dimitri says. His eyes display his sincerity ever so clearly even under the moonlight, and Byleth carves them in her memory down to its very detail, down to the crinkles at the corner of his eyes. But Dimitri averts his gaze before Byleth can relish it some more. Good night, Byleth, he says quickly, leaving her alone without another word. A familiar feeling of loneliness starts to sprout at the pit of her stomach. Do you think it would be so simple? Byleth flinches at the voice ringing in her head. Suthis? But the voice definitely does not belong to her. The voice is raspier and lower than what Byleth is accustomed to. Siding with your beloved does not change the fate of this reality. She searches around wildly for the voice. Then, her eyes catch a flicker of purple and white shimmer from afar. A pair of beady, red eyes glare at her in the darkness. Instinctively, her hand touches the hilt of her sword. The darkness will prevail. The voice booms in her mind despite the figure lurking far away from her. She squeezes her eyes shut, shaking her head furiously. And when she opens them again, the figure is gone. Chapter 18. Mercedes and Annette bring her around the camp, introducing her to both familiar and unfamiliar faces within the kingdom troops. They're as kind as she remembers them to be, never once showing their fear of her if they have been trying to hide it. Oh, and this is my father, Gustav. Annette introduces to her with a giant smile. He just arrived here with the Alliance. It is a pleasure to meet you, Gustav says with a polite bow. I have heard countless stories of your might when you worked with the Empire. It is indeed a blessing by the goddess that you decided to join us now. Byleth smiles at his familiar cordiality. It is a pleasure as well. Her heart only grows warm as she watches the father-daughter duo interact without the trace of awkwardness they seemed to have in their younger years. Thank you for introducing me to everybody at the camp, Byleth says. I must be going now. I have been told to regroup with the mercenaries after lunch. All right. Let's meet again for tea. Annette beams. Merci, and I prepared some baked sweets for the group today. Mercedes giggles. We hope it'll be to your liking. I will be delighted. Byleth nods, giving them a quick wave goodbye. The mercenaries have been ordered to station together with the kingdom's main unit. Byleth remains quiet within the crowd of troops that chat idly within campgrounds, carefully identifying their uniforms. There, Ash leads the knights alongside Yuri. As expected with his guile, the man was able to climb the ranks speedily to lead the mercenaries alongside him. Oh. It's the Ashen Demon. Ash waves at her to get her attention. Byleth. Yuri corrects. You do remember that His Majesty told us to stop calling her that, right? Right. Sorry. Ash frowns, lowering his head. You may call me whatever you like. Byleth shakes her head. She tilts her head to take a better look at him, though he seems to continue averting his gaze while he bites his lip anxiously. Yuri exhales softly. You must forgive him. He's been feeling terrible for days with how he's treated you. He says the word treated in air quotes with a roll of his eyes. Treated? Byleth is utterly confused. Ash gulps. I still remember the day when you told me to send your message to our main forces. That I wouldn't engage if you didn't. Byleth nods. I remember. I never told them about it until Ingrid thought you were trustworthy. I didn't know if I could trust you. His voice grows quieter. I'm sorry. Byleth gives him a reassuring smile. He always had the tendency to be hard on himself. You did what you thought was right at the time. Byleth notes. It is normal to evaluate your risk. What did I say? Yuri shoots him an amused look. Ash nods softly. His timid expression is now gone, stealing his gaze to a rare, serious look. You proved yourself when you saved her. For that, know that you have my trust. Byleth smiles. I'm glad. Amidst the forces are also soldiers from Duskur. Byleth recognizes them from their war helmets with its long horns and their steel brigand armor. They chat amicably with their main commander Dedu. The two only exchange looks, giving each other a respectful yet brief bow of their heads. She can't help but smile to herself in pride at the king's liege as he stands tall amongst his own people. It's a dream she always knew he had. There is no sign of hostility amongst the knights and Duskur soldiers that mingle together. Byleth must have missed it, but perhaps their alliance in this war has allowed them to put their differences aside. She continues to watch her former students give their commands with conviction and a strong sense of purpose. They have developed and matured into leaders faster than she remembers. Their victory has progressed faster than she remembers. However, her swelling pride is interrupted by the memory of the red eyes that glared at her the previous night. Her breath hitches at how her joy abruptly ends, being replaced with a tiny sprout of anxiety that tingles within her. Before she can dwell any further on it, the gates of the camp open suddenly. It's Lady Rhea. A soldier gasps. Byleth whips her head at the camp gates to see the gatekeeper saluting the archbishop who walks alongside Dimitri, along with none other than Claude and Hilda. Damn it! Geralt, who stands next to her, curses quietly, dragging Byleth further away from the gates. Why did she come all the way here? They hurry inside the infirmary, peeking through its window. Geralt sighs frustratedly. Now we have to be on our toes. What a pain. Byleth stares at the kingdom, church, and alliance alike, all working together. She looks away, pressing her back against the wall. She recalls of the glimpse of her reality that Suthies had shown her, the three powers of Fodlan grouped together as one. That tiny sprout continues to grow within her indelibly. Yet, she is unable to conjure what it is. Geralt closes the curtain of the window. Looks like they decided to have their little chat in the middle of the camp. We might be stuck here for a while. The man grunts, sitting down and crossing his legs as he leans on the wall. He smiles awkwardly at the mages passing by who eye the two loitering mercenaries in confusion. Byleth sits next to him now, hugging her knees against her chest. Her father observes her briefly before resting his head on his palm, lowering his voice so that the healers don't eavesdrop. You want to talk to him, don't you? She props her head up her knees. I don't know how, he's so busy. Her father grins. It's the widest grin she's ever seen him wear with an evident inclination to tease, and it only flusters her. Your mother was a shy woman too. There were times when I knew that she was avoiding me. She would always make excuses like how she didn't want to keep me when I had another job waiting. But that only shut down more chances to have a proper conversation together. Piece of advice. He winks at her. Just gather your guts and talk to the guy. There's nothing to lose, except time wasted. Her mouth clamps shut at that. Time. That's right. She can't afford to sit around and do nothing. She has to talk to him if she wants to go back. So, you lost too. Byleth glances up at Lindhart, who wipes his hands with a towel, having tended to one of the injured soldiers. Byleth smirks. You can say that. I'm glad to see that you are well. Her urge to joke fades when she is unable to read the expression on his face. He lowers his gaze to the ground. They made me a general of their army and expected me to persuade the Imperial forces during the invasion of my home. I did not see you during that battle. Byleth notes. I did nothing on that front, of course. Not that my family would listen, anyway. He says lowly. Though I wonder what that will entail for me here, and what consequences I will face. Byleth's expression falters as she observes him. His posture does not give anything away at first glance, but she notices how he has become distant. She doesn't say a word, unsure of how to respond. And she doesn't have to, as he immediately changes the topic. What are you doing sitting around here anyway? This is hardly a relaxing place to nap. Not with the smell of blood and vulneraries everywhere. His eyes move over to the window and it's as if he was just hit by some sort of epiphany. Unless, oh. We're just, Byleth defends quickly. Hiding. Gerald finishes. Hey, if you happen to bump into the Archbishop or anyone of her kin, make sure not to mention us. I see no reason as to why I would interact with them. His deadpan expression returns. I have already done my part for the kingdom, anyhow. The man yawns, ready to walk away to the next healing bed. But don't worry. He shoots Byleth a knowing look. I won't say a thing about your little crush on His Majesty. Byleth jumps up at the sudden expose, and she quickly peeps through the window. Dimitri is the only one who stands there now, chatting away with the soldiers that idle around. Talk about uncanny timing. As soon as the coast clears, she notices that Dimitri has already gone. Before she can look for him, she's stopped by his 3 childhood friends. Hey, bye. Sylvain winks. Got a minute? Felix shoots him an annoyed glare. Try not to act so crass, Sylvain. What? That's what Dorothea calls her. Because they're friends. Ingrid whines. You can barely call yourself that when you haven't apologized for trying to kill her. Sylvain blanches at the comment, smiling awkwardly at her. Why, you really don't know how to hold back your punches, huh, Ingrid? Byleth shakes her head, hoping to dismiss their remorse. We were enemies. There's no need to feel bad in the middle of a war. You're right. Felix nods. We do not have the obligation to spare your life nor anybody who was on the opposite side. Felix, Ingrid warns. Nevertheless. Perhaps we were being too reckless. Felix's eyes remain on Byleth, but instead of his challenging gaze, they hold a hint of sincerity. We swung our blade blindly without assessing the situation. For that, we're sorry. Byleth can only gape at Felix's humble apology. She has never seen him act so vulnerable, considering how hard-headed and stubborn he is. You saved my life. Ingrid adds, brightening up with a smile as her face grows flushed. I don't think I can ever repay you for that. All I can say now is that words cannot express how grateful I am that you appeared before me that day. She's right. Sylvain speaks in a soft voice unlike his usual, playful tone. Knowing that you saved her and protected her while I couldn't. He approaches her, taking a hold of her hand and bringing it to his lips. I am forever indebted to you. Byleth remains speechless, overwhelmed by their sincerity. Hey. Ingrid stammers, her face turning into a deeper shade of red as she smacks Sylvain's head from behind. It's my life. You're not the one who owes her anything. And stop trying to pull any moves with her out of all people. The man winces at the impact, rubbing his head soothingly. Ow, that hurt. And I wasn't flirting. Promise. The two continue to bicker while Felix only crosses his arms and sighs. He bats an eye at Byleth once more. Anyway, you've been requested to the strategy meeting. He says. Follow me. Well, isn't it the Ashen Demon in the flesh? Claude greets, shaking her hand firmly. Ah, excuse my manners. Byleth. We've heard so many stories of your strength when you were with the Empire. Hilda beams. I'm so glad you're finally on our side. Byleth glances around the long table, seated by the Kingdom and Alliance's most trusted individuals. If it were not for this world, she wouldn't have felt so out of place. But amongst them sits Shay, who quietly observes her, just like she does him. She hasn't seen him in a while, and his presence reminds her that he has taken her place in this world as a trusted mercenary. So she can't help but ask. Why did you request me here? She points the question at Dimitri, but he stays quiet, analyzing her cautiously. Claude is the one to break the ice. Straight to the point with you. Claude smirks. I like it. You've been with the Empire for what, 5 moons now? It's longer than most of the Imperial surrenders that came here. And considering that you're a mercenary without any affiliation to the Empire, we thought you would be the most unbiased person to ask. Unbiased, huh? It's ironic to hear it. We're going to need your insider scoop on the Empire's forces. Word has been brought to us that they amassed in the Valley of Torment. And the Emperor herself has joined them. The Emperor. Byleth's eyes widen. That means those who slither in the dark are with her. Do you know them? Dmitri now breaks his silence, sitting up in interest. They've been using the Emperor as their puppet for a while now. Byleth tells him. If they're here, I suggest prioritizing our efforts towards their group rather than at the Emperor herself. And why should we do that? Claude challenges. If we can strike down the Emperor, then the reign of the Empire will be over. We can't delay that in exchange for taking down these dark mages. Those who slither in the dark are not to be underestimated. Byleth insists. They aim to seize control of all of Fodlan. They tried to do so with the kingdom and failed. Now they attempt to control the Empire. And it's a matter of time that they eradicate the Church. Defeating Edelgard now will just make them replace her with another face. From what I know, Duke Aegir has been conspiring closely with them for a while now. It might be a matter of time that he's to be controlled too. Or maybe he already is. You're telling me Duke Aegir is a traitor? Shay sputters. Not many from the Empire know this. Byleth says. Or perhaps, they refuse to see it. The Empire has been crumbling from within, after all. They've grown desperate. To think that they'd have such a grasp over the tides of the war. Dmitri mutters. They are a more intimidating foe than I thought. We will have to scour for them. They easily put on a disguise. Byleth warns. It's likely that they might use that to their advantage to have a head start in clearing the path towards Gareg Mach for the Emperor to retreat. Then we'll have no choice to bring our whole strength in this fight as planned. Claude says. And bring a smaller force to sniff out the path. Byleth agrees. I don't know how many dark mages from that group will be there, so it's best to take out as many soldiers as we can. Annette is the best to navigate any hidden paths with her reason magic. Petra, Shamir, and Yuri are our best bets as well to trace out any ambushes while keeping a low profile. Perhaps it won't take them out, but it will at least slow them down. The room falls quiet. Byleth scans around in confusion. She wonders what she said this time to make them act so strange. I can do that. Annette is the first to speak up, her odd smile warming up the tension. Wow, Byleth, you're a natural at command. To think you'd know who and how to allocate us to. Byleth winces despite the compliment. She did it again. She revealed herself too much. She glances at both Dmitri and Claude. My apologies. Dmitri opens his mouth. He's about to speak, but he closes it again, settling on keeping his thoughts to himself. But Claude laughs in amusement. Hey, why the embarrassment? This is why we requested you here. He claps his hands together. All right, everyone. Meeting adjourned. The chairs scrape on the cobblestone floor as the group stand up, making their way out of the command center. Some, like Annette and Ingrid, do not leave without giving Byleth a polite smile and a quick goodbye. Before Byleth leaves, Claude approaches her with a smile of his own. Thanks for tipping me off. Claude adds. It was the push I needed. The man lets out an empty chuckle. I've been grappling with what to do for a long time. If I'd had someone like you around, I might have made the right decision in the first place. I bet I'd be walking a very different path right now. Lester would sure be different. Maybe even all of Fodlan would be different. I think you're giving me too much credit. Byleth frowns. The pit that had formed in her stomach deepens further as she wonders just how different Fodlan is turning to be. The more it changes and strays away from her real world, she finds it more difficult to decipher just what is the wrong or right decision. I don't know. Claude shrugs. I'm a pretty good judge of character. But anyway, if you don't have anything else lined up after the war, why not come with me? I think we make a pretty good team. Yeah, maybe we do. She says half-heartedly. I'll give it some thought. That's all I can ask. He grins. But for now, I guess you know what to do next. He winks, patting her shoulder before leaving with the rest. She watches him go before her eyes land on Dmitri next, who busies himself with Rodrigue. Once again, she is unable to talk to him. You look puzzled. Is something wrong? She sees Shay leaning by the door frame. She shakes her head dismissively. I just feel strange. Everyone's been much more welcoming than I thought they'd be. No one's all that terrified of me. That's one way for her to put it. Regardless of all the uncertainty, she does feel the comfort of being home. Hey, you're on our side now. Shay chuckles. They can probably finally be amazed with what you could do rather than shake in their boots about it. It's especially reassuring now that they know you'll be fighting with us in taking down the Empire and that sketchy group. She smirks, but it quickly fades as she recalls of the mysterious figure that appeared before her. Do you know of them? She asks. Those who slither in the dark. His smile fades now as well, turning into something more frustrated. No. I never heard of them. But I know what you're thinking. I hold the same power, so that means I'm one of them. Honestly, I don't know how, but that's why I hope by catching them, I can get some answers. She nods, accepting his answer for now. You cannot hand your trust over a few words so easily. Suthies chides. He must be holding his secrets. It will be foolish to force it out of him if he's so trusted within the Force. Byleth responds. We need to be patient about this. Shay interrupts her thoughts, his expression filled with curiosity. By the way, you don't happen to know about my powers, do you? Not yet. She eyes him suspiciously. But we'll find those answers for you soon. The Kingdom and Alliance troops march onto the Valley of Torment, led by their two leaders who stride with the confidence of kings. Byleth walks behind them with the rest of the forces, catching how Claude murmurs something inaudible against Dimitri's ear, who only listens to him with a determined gaze. Claude then pats his friend's shoulder in encouragement and they eventually exchange smiles. The two stand side by side as allies, rather than against each other. A past memory flickers in Byleth's mind on the last time she was at war with the Alliance and Empire. Kill every last one of them. Dimitri had roared, bringing his soldiers to an almost certain death, as he too was enamored with the idea. So much of the scenery and of the people are the same, yet there are changes that Byleth has seen, all because of a ripple in the water that has caused the tides of time to alter. And the more Byleth witnesses this, the more complicated the sprout inside her twists and turns, mixing feelings that she is still unable to comprehend. There is her pride and joy as a professor, as a friend, and more so as his wife. But there is something lurking within. Something dark. That figure in the darkness continues to persist in her mind, its eyes piercing through her soul with its sinister crimson eyes. Siding with your beloved does not change the fate of this reality. She tries to ignore her pestering anxiety. It will do her no good if she is to try and get back to where she belongs. They can finally hear the faraway battle cries and the flag of the Empire, as well as a smaller one of the Black Eagles that wave up high in the air. The Kingdom, Alliance, and Church troops raise their weapons in response, roaring as they begin their clash with the enemy. Be careful, everyone. Dimitri warns. If all of our strongholds fall, we'll have no path left to the monastery. At the opposite side of the field, Duke Aegir leads his army under the guise of Edelgard's right-hand man. Your Majesty, Duke Aegir smiles cunningly. Might you bless the army with some rousing words? That is, after all, your purpose here. Yes. Right. Edelgard says blandly. She stares at nothing with her dead fish eyes. That's Edie. Byleth hears Dorothea gasp from behind. What happened to her? Byleth scans around. If Edelgard is still hypnotized, Thales must be lurking somewhere nearby. The forces begin to murmur at the Emperor's obvious disorienting state. But the chatter is forced to a stop when an enemy approaches, striking the ground so strongly that it trembles and cracks. As the debris settles, the frightening Death Knight appears on his stallion, glaring at them with his frenzied glare. The Death Knight. Dimitri gasps. I can't say I expected him. If we lose the strongholds to our rear, we won't be able to isolate him. Looks like he's in a bit of a mood. Claude comments. We'll have to use a little trickery to get him surrounded. A memory flickers across Byleth's head of Juritzaw's explanation of the Death Knight. He is merely an illusion, a demon who resides in my heart. He is not me. Not who I am at my core. He thrives and feasts upon blood, death, suffering. Just another bloodthirsty demon. A beast who kills with no strategy. He is driven with madness, blind of rationality. Send him to the center and station the mages to throw down their resonant spells after closing the gates. Byleth tells Dimitri. You want to surround him. Dimitri gapes at her. Are you sure that will work? We used this strategy once before. He is different on the battlefield. Byleth says. He fights blindly, only setting sights for fresh kills. He won't think twice in checking his surroundings. It's a gamble, but he might not expect such an attack on him. But how do we do that? Byleth glances around, her eyes landing on the Death Knight's sister. She closes her eyes, taking a deep breath. Have Mercedes lure him in. Byleth says. Me. Mercedes places her hands on her chest in surprise. Mercedes. Dimitri shoots Byleth an admonishing look. She's a mage. It's risky to bring her to the front lines. He will let down his guard when he sees you. She tells Mercedes before responding to Dimitri. I will protect her. I swear by it. Byleth promises. Dimitri and Claude exchange looks, giving each other a curt nod. Everyone, listen up. Claude yells to the troops. Draw the Death Knight into the center of the battlefield. Mercedes follows Byleth without fear as they tail the Death Knight. As soon as she sees him galloping away, she leaps in the air, striking a mighty blow down to the ground. The Death Knight halts, turning back at Byleth now. Perhaps you can be the one to give me death. Juritsa says. Mercedes' breath hitches, looking at Byleth in stupor. That voice. Good. We have his attention. Dimitri says. Just keep leading him to the center. Don't try to fight the Death Knight head-on. Claude reminds. I crave death. The Death Knight seethes, raising his scythe. I recognize your voice, Emil. Mercedes says. It's you, isn't it? Before Mercedes can try to reason with him, he slashes down his scythe blindly. Byleth grabs Mercedes' arm, dragging her out of the attack range. We have to run. Byleth begins her sprint toward the center with Mercedes following suit, her face etched with worry. The Death Knight, Mercedes murmurs. It has to be him. I just know it. Byleth glances behind her and sees that the Death Knight is still in pursuit of them. It'll be all right, Mercedes. Byleth gazes firmly at her. For now, let's stick to the plan. The two reach the center. As soon as they stop, the Death Knight roars, slashing his scythe at them once more. Byleth deflects it with her sword before gaining back her distance. Okay, we've drawn him into our trap. Ash cheers. But is that really going to bring him down? There's nowhere for him to run now. Claude says. Close the gates. The Death Knight growls. Byleth and Mercedes run out, barely able to leave the center before the gates close and the Death Knight can slash them once more. I didn't expect him to fall for such a tactic again. Dimitri gasps, looking at Byleth in awe. Regardless, now we will weaken the Death Knight with magic. On your command. Yes, Your Majesty. A church soldier says. At the ready, mages. Fire. The Death Knight takes a direct hit by the resonant magic that rains down brutally. Mercedes gasps, covering her mouth with her hands. Her body trembles in fear at the sight. Mercedes, Dida stares at her in concern. Fling open the gates, Dimitri says as soon as the magic dissipates. Give the Death Knight everything we have. The Death Knight roars. More. I still draw breath. He's still standing after that. Sylvain gasps out, dumbfounded like a deer in headlights. It's like he's possessed or something. Let me go to him, Dimitri. Mercedes breaks the ranks as she pleads. I might be able to convince him to surrender. Mercedes, wait. Dimitri calls out to her, but it falls on deaf ears. Byleth makes chase and stays behind Mercedes, who continues to beeline towards her brother. Her guard has been completely lowered that soldier after soldier attempts to head her direction. But Byleth she strikes them down before they can take her life. Emil, I know it's you. Mercedes cries. Please don't do this. A battle to the death will be my final pleasure. He only responds. And none will get in my way. He slashes at Mercedes again. She cries in pain as it hits her and she collapses to the ground, bleeding profusely. Merci! Annette screams. Without a moment to waste, Byleth turns back time before the Death Knight can land a hit on her. Instead, Byleth sprints towards them, pushing Mercedes out of the way. But Byleth is unable to completely dodge the attack. The blade grazes her back before Byleth topples down onto the ground, shielding Mercedes in her arms. Byleth! Mercedes gasps in horror. Byleth grunts at the gash that has opened from behind. It's fine. Byleth says. It's not serious. The Death Knight does not hesitate to lift his scythe once more. Byleth scrambles for her sword, but she won't be able to dodge it in time. As the scythe strikes downwards, she does not feel any impact nor pain. Instead, she feels a pair of arms engulf her and Mercedes, rushing them away from the battle. The two are placed back down on the ground gently. As she looks up at her savior, she meets Dimitri's focused gaze once again, staring at her intently. Are you all right? Dimitri asks softly. Wordlessly, she gives him a nod. His jaw tightens as he scans her before glancing at Mercedes. See to it that you heal her first. He stands back up quickly before Byleth can give him a word of thanks, as he rushes toward the Death Knight, who Shay has been fending off by himself. White magic emits from Mercedes' hands as she places them on Byleth's back. Tears fall down her cheeks as she sobs quietly to herself. Emil, I can't get through to you, can I? Byleth remains silent, letting her friend cry in peace. Instead, her eyes are set forward, watching the Death Knight struggle against Dimitri and Shay combined might, while the other blue lions fend off the soldiers in the periphery. Her eyes remain on the duo, however, as they fight in tandem, as if they have fought together for years as comrades in arms. Seeing Dimitri and Shay fight reminds her when she was in his place once. Fighting next to the king towards a common enemy. But it's not like that now. Instead, she recklessly got herself injured and she now is only able to stay by the sidelines. The Death Knight collapses, but instead of howling in pain, he only laughs maniacally at his demise. Yes, yes. Death draws near. Adrenaline rushes through Byleth. No. She can't just sit around uselessly like she's done many times before. I'm fine now, Mercedes. Byleth stands up as soon as she feels the ease on her back. Come. The fight is not over. As they rush to the scene, Mercedes screams as Dimitri is about to strike his lance down at the Death Knight. Stop. Mercedes screams, rushing to the Death Knight's side. Enough of this, Emil. Mercedes begs again. Please. Just stop fighting and come with us. Mercedes, Dimitri remains stunned, freezing his lance in place as he watches the new event unfold. The Death Knight no longer retorts or struggles to fight back. Instead, his voice falls into a whisper. Mercedes. He mutters. The traces of the Death Knight's voice fades away, turning into the familiar tone that Jaritza holds when he speaks at peace. Very well. I will lay down my arms. Byleth watches as Jaritza removes his helmet and Mercedes cradles his face in tears. It can't be, Shay gasps. Isn't he? Professor Jaritza. Out of all people, the kingdom even managed to make the Death Knight surrender, the one who cannot be reasoned with. It makes it impossible for Byleth not to acknowledge just how less blood-stained this path of time is becoming. At the corner of her eye, she sees a dark spell cast towards their direction. Byleth shields the attack from the group by countering it with one of her own spells. A dark mage then appears before her, extending their palms at her, ready to cast another spell. She recognizes their uniform anywhere. Get him out of here. Now. Byleth orders. Those who slither in the dark are here. She evades the spells of Nosferatu and Meyer that blast towards her direction seamlessly, with the sole focus to hunt her prey. It only takes Byleth a few seconds until she closes the gap with the mage, slashing them down. But it's not over yet. The rite of war is turning against us. Duke Agir spits. Let us flee, Your Majesty. Our most loyal minister will handle the rest. Yes, Edelgard says. We leave it to you, Count Berglies. They're here. Felix yells. Those who slither in the dark continue to appear in larger numbers at the rear, now raining down their resonant magic across the battlefield. And as the mages surround them, Imperial reinforcements appear from the north. He could have at least tried to hide the act. Count Berglis leads the reinforcements from the north. Still, I have a duty to uphold. His son, Caspar, stands by his side in assistance. Byleth doesn't think that she's seen him ever since he was dispatched back in Gloucester. Yeah. These guys are no match for us. Let's show them what we can do. Just when I thought we were making progress. Annette clenches on Crusher more tightly as the number of enemies continue to grow. How are we supposed to fight against this? They're coming at us from all directions. Ingrid points out. We'll have to split up. The dark mages are mine then. Byleth stealthily avoids the meteors that fall from the air, narrowing her target at the main caster that stands by the south stronghold. When she arrives, Shay warps before her, signaling her with his sword. Let's go get him. He declares. Don't kill him. She warns. We must interrogate him. He might know something. The two combine their mercenary strength, torpedoing through the mages, slashing them down all at once. What the? Impossible. The main caster is the last one standing, desperately shooting his dark spells at them. The two avoid the spells like a synchronized dance, closing the gap further and further. The mage is now at arm's length and Byleth tackles him down to the ground. She presses her sword against him. Where is your leader? Please spare me. The dark mage pleads. Where is your leader? Where is Thales? I don't know. She presses the sword with more force, grazing his neck enough to let a droplet of blood trickle down. The mage cries, tears of pain welling up at the corner of his eyes as he chokes, gasping for air. Tell me, and perhaps your life will be spared. She threatens. But it's as if time slows down. Instead of the mage's contorted face that writhes in pain, suddenly, it morphs into something inexplicable. His eyes turn scarlet red as they gaze at her soul, and he gives her a wicked grin. Shivers send down Byleth's spine. This is not the same mage she fights. These are the same eyes that hid in the darkness. The world around her suddenly turns dark and strong gusts of wind push against her from all directions, taking away the air from her lungs. Above her, she notices a vortex up in the sky, swirling and sucking everything in it. It cracks, revealing lights of bright purple to the point that it almost blinds her. Power surges within her, taking over her senses. She reflexively strikes down at Nowhere. But as she does so, she flickers back in her reality, with her sword meeting the mage, taking him down in one blow. She drops her sword in shock. Suddenly, the world is back to normal, as if it were all a dream. She's ready for the mage to magically get up and ambush her, but he does nothing of the sort. Instead, he only lies lifelessly on the ground. Somebody winces in pain. When she turns, she sees how Shay's face, which turned as pale as snow, slowly regains color, and he gasps for air, anchoring his hands on his knees. He pants, blinking at the mage before them. I thought, he looks up at Byleth, beads of sweat falling from his forehead. You said not to kill them. She stares down at her hand, opening and closing it with ease, free from any control. What was that? She asks Suthies. But she does not respond. I'm sorry. She says, her eyes still glued on her hand. Something came over me. It's fine. Shay hums with a frown. Somehow, I don't think you're the only one. She sighs. We can discuss this later. Right now, we should regroup with the others. They make their way back to the west. By the time they arrive, however, their armies have already cleaned up the scene. At the forefront, Byleth recognizes Hilda's brother, Holst, land the final blow on Count Berglis before he steps back in haste. We've slowed them down as much as we can. Count Berglis pants, readying his flee with the rest of the Imperial forces. Time to retreat. All forces, fall back. I'll bring up the rear. We won't let them get away. Dmitri chants. Push on to Gareg Mach. We'll defeat the Emperor and end this war. Byleth watches soldiers in colors of blue and yellow cheer in victory. Holst howls triumphantly, boosting everyone's morale as they march on. The Death Knight. Holst. Their forces continue to grow stronger and stronger. And she joins the kingdom in their glory. Byleth can only wonder how much more victory they will sow. Although our path is still a long one, we are approaching the end of this war. Sylvain cheers, raising his goblet high at the starry sky. To victory! To victory! The Blue Lions repeats, clapping and laughing around. Byleth huddles near the fire, watching their smiling faces lit by the moonlight and flames alike. They chatter boisterously of the battle, giggling excitedly amongst themselves, waving their arms about as they imitate their latest conquests. Her gaze softens at the sight. Despite the exhaustion and stress this battle has put on her, it has been a while since she's felt such joy, unriddled with her duties and mission. She can simply just be and act as their friend and ally in their celebration. A wave of nostalgia washes through her as she remembers the last time the Blue Lions all gathered around like this. She remembers it to be when she had coronated her husband and future king. Their celebration is almost as jovial as the festivities back then, except for the lively performance of the kingdom's musicians. Instead, the music that fills in now are the shanties sung by soldiers and mercenaries alike, and the laughter of her fellow friends. They dance to the music, with Sylvain dragging her from her seat and spinning her in a circle. As he grows more light on his feet from the drinks, he lifts his evidently reluctant childhood friends up their feet to join them, whereas Yuri offers his hand at Ash. The group sing, dance and drink all evening, and her father too is at the verge of drowning in his drunkenness. She can only chide him of his recklessness, but she's usually unable to argue with him for long when her words only go from one ear to another. As her feet get tired from the festivities, she sneaks out of their camp into the woods where the sound of crickets within the silence greet her. She feels light from it all, inhaling the fresh air after a long, arduous battle. As she continues to walk, she spots silver armor shining from afar. Looks like somebody else left the scene like her. She approaches the figure and now sees the short blonde ponytail and sturdy back turned against her. Dimitri, she blurts out. The man flinches, turning back at her in surprise. Oh. Byleth. He exhales in relief. Have you grown weary of the festivities? She smirks to herself. Of course, it would be him who snuck out of a crowd. Quite. She admits. I wanted to have a break. Why are you not joining them? I do not have the heart to celebrate yet. He shakes his head. The war is not over. Despite their rejoice, I only feel that there is so much left for me to do. Then he beams at her. And what of you? I saw that you enjoyed the celebration. I have never seen anybody devour as much food in one sitting such as you. Food is always delicious after a long battle. She pumps her fists in excitement. Dimitri smiles at her amusingly. Well, I suppose I should ask the kitchen staff to prepare more food in the future if it is such a delight. She tilts her head at the thought. That does sound enticing. Dimitri's smile widens before letting out a small chuckle. I haven't thanked you yet. For your assistance in this battle, that is. You helped tremendously with our strategy in claiming victory. Your leadership and quick thinking is what allowed us to bring the advantage to our side with ease. I do not think we can do it without you. You're being too kind. She huffs. You and Claude give me too much credit. It is only the truth. He insists. Then he pauses for a moment, his gaze softening. I always wanted to ask you this. But, why did you yield so easily to the kingdom? It is clear to me now that you could have obliterated us with one swoop, but you chose not to. It is as if you hold back. And I do not believe that it is coin that you seek. So, what is it? Byleth ponders for a moment, wondering if she should just tell him the truth. It would be foolish obviously to tell him that she was his future wife, but should she at least tell him that she traveled back in time? But she hesitates. She has never told anyone of her powers. She told her father somewhat, but that was when she didn't believe any of it was real. Now that she starts to consider this as a reality, not hers, but a reality all the same, it unsettles her. There is a reason that she has never told anybody about them. She hasn't even told her own husband of her powers. There is a heavy burden that she will share if she is to spill the truth. Those who know her secrets will have to share the burden of knowing many times their loved ones have died. How many loved ones were unable to be saved? And so, her hesitation wins as she decides to speak in omission of truth. I do not like war. Clearly, Dmitri did not expect that answer. I want to end it for the sake of the people I care about, she says wistfully. They need me. And they're waiting for me. I have to protect them. I swear on my life that no matter what happens, I will return. I promised that much. I see. Dmitri mutters. His frown deepens. For so long, I always considered you to be, well, a demon. Byleth asks amusingly. Dmitri winces. Well, yes. You're not the first one to think such a thing. I do not take it personally. I'm afraid that does not make me feel any better. Dmitri grimaces. How did you get it? My nickname. Byleth ponders for a while. Well, Ashen came from the word ash. Like my hair. She fiddles with her hair which shines a mint green. Dmitri's gaze lingers at it. Ash. He hums. Now that I think about it, your hair color has changed, hasn't it? Compared to the first time we met. Even your eyes. I was granted a power that caused these changes. She answers. Dmitri strokes his chin. What is it with mercenaries and their mysterious powers? You tell me. But I suppose the name doesn't suit me anymore, does it? Byleth nods in agreement. Maybe I should be called the Green Demon. Or, perhaps the Mint Monster. He gapes at her for a moment, as if she had just caught him off guard. Then he laughs. That melodic laugh. She always feels blessed when her ears listen to it. What silly nicknames. His shoulders tremble as he holds his stomach. The Mint Monster. I didn't know you had such a sense of humor, Byleth. She beams at him, giddy at the fluttering in her chest. When his eyes catch hers, however, his breath hitches. Byleth notices how he gapes at her again, swallowing thickly at the sight of her, as she is some sort of enigma in his presence. She peers at him. What is it? A blush dusts the man's cheeks. It's nothing. Forgive me. It's just, your smile. The comment, subtly yet quickly, creates a spark of hope within her, and she smiles again, as she always does for him. I don't mind. She tells him. His blush deepens and he looks away. And how about the second part of your nickname? Dmitri quickly asks. Demon, her smile falters slightly. I'm not sure. It's been with me ever since I was a child. The mercenaries started to call that when I started joining them in their jobs. You were a mercenary, even as a child. As Byleth nods, Dmitri's expression completely falls. I'm sorry to hear that. It's fine. It's just a duty. But no child should have handled a burden such as that. Dmitri says. I know the feeling very well. He gazes up at the moon. I lost my family at a very young age. Because of that, the future of the Holy Kingdom of Faerghus lies on my shoulders alone. It has been engraved in me ever since. This duty, it's inescapable. No matter how hard I try. His eyes meet hers once more. I do not have much of a choice, but I'd like to think that you do. After the war, what would you like to do? Would you want to continue your life as a mercenary or perhaps, well, remain in the kingdom? His eyes reflect the moonlight, dazzling with his typical sincerity and a hidden hope. She opens her mouth to say something, but closes it shut immediately. For she remembers of her own duties. It is not her life as a mercenary that she thinks about. It's of her role as the Archbishop and Queen. As the Archbishop, it was entrusted to her in Lady Rhea's place without any warning. She had no knowledge nor connection to the Church's teachings, but she had to fulfill it. It was what was expected of her, especially when the land was ravaged with the damages of war. She could not deny her role. Not when Lady Rhea made it clear of her place. She is a vessel to the progenitor god. It is her fate. And as Suthies had told her once, fate cannot be changed. And her role as a queen, perhaps it is the only role of hers she chose for herself. For it was her choice to marry the king. But in doing so, she was greeted by its consequences. Lady Rhea's opposition. Are you the Archbishop first or the Queen? The noble's spiteful comments. The Church has always been separated from the state. And you choose to break this sacred rule because of your feelings? I do not have as much freedom as you believe. Byleth says quietly. What I want, does not matter. The moonlight shines softly on Dimitri's face, revealing his quiet, sad expression. I see. He whispers, looking downcast. Her roles have always been put in a weighing scale battling against each other. As one tips the scale, the other will force its weight down to remind her that it must not be forgotten. Her choice to become queen serves as a reminder. By choosing for herself, she brings trouble and heavier burdens to those around her. In the end, it is not in her right to choose. But it is too late to draw back from that. As time passes, the weights have grown heavier and heavier as more and more failures pile up on top of it, too much for her to count, and some too painful for her to bring back to the surface, dangerously sitting on the scale that is ready to break in any moment. Or perhaps it has already broken. She has been brought here, abandoning her loved ones once again, burdening them with her disappearance. Who knows what consequences they face because of her recklessness? Even now, in this reality, how had she succeeded them? She is with them now, but even so, she was injured on the battlefield when clashing against the Death Knight, and she did not help in his surrender. Most of all, she didn't get the answers they all needed because she slipped up and killed the mage who could possibly give them what they wanted. I'd still hope for you to think about it. Dimitri manages a small smile. Your command truly is unparalleled. I don't think I've seen anyone control the tides of a battle with such ease. Dimitri, she mutters. He shuffles his feet abashedly, unusual for a tall king like him to do. It will be a shame if we lose someone as valuable as you. The two stare at each other, ignoring the chilly air that brings them to slightly shiver. There is something peculiar at how even in this reality, Dimitri somehow puts his faith in her, regardless of how undeserving it may be. She still has not found the confidence to believe his words. But if anything, it stirs a motivation within her. She finds the scale rebuilding itself, giving her a second chance. Perhaps she can still make things right. Or perhaps she is simply being desperate. There are still so many answers to unravel. She cannot just lose resolve here. So she smiles at him once more, nervously yet genuinely all the same. Then I'll have a think about it. Thank you. Chapter 19. With Duke Agir's plans becoming more unpredictable, the kingdom splits away from the Alliance and Church in their attempt to reclaim Garreg Mach. Dimitri leaves his early morning meeting wearily. They had just concluded to use all their forces to stop Duke Agir and Count Berglis in their tracks. Once again, they are putting all their chips on the board. The kingdom slowly makes their way forward, intersecting through Daphnal territory and setting up their temporary base camp. It will probably take them almost a moon until they can reach the enemy. Despite it being far away, Dimitri uses it as an opportunity to make the extra preparations, ordering more supplies for the blacksmith and hiring more battalions to join their ranks. Usually, when he walks around the camp, he strides with the purpose of being somewhere in haste. Whether it be strategy discussions with the tactics master or allocation of new battalions, his feet know where to take him and they do not stop for anything. But it has changed. And he is not that dense to know when it has shifted. Whenever he is at the camp, his eyes will not fail to notice the shine of emerald at his periphery. The newly added mercenary always manages to catch his attention without even trying. However, whether it be captivation or suspicion, he does not know. On the one hand, upon their first counter, he was met with a vision of Nemesis striking him down, taking her place in battle. He wonders what that relation means. If she happens to possess a dark power just like Shay does. But on the other hand, he cannot deny how she lights up the world around her. He does not miss how the Blue Lions have grown comfortable around her so quickly, let alone the soldiers and merchants around the camp. There is something so real, breathing fully with life, in her presence. And he cannot ignore it when she always stares at him so intensely as if she wants to pour fire into his eyes. It shakes him to his core that he is unable to hold her stare, always having to look away to hide the rapid pacing of his heart. So now, when he walks to the training grounds to practice with his two boisterous friends, instead of his usual quick stride, his pace is slow and deliberate, as if he loiters around expectantly to catch a glimpse of her passing by. What are you standing around for? Felix scowls at him, walking out of the training ground entrance. Sylvain and I already finished a couple of rounds. You best not dull your weapon, boar. You know, Faye, you chide so much about the way I address people, yet you're not too nice yourself. Sylvain joins in, leaning against the fence. Then he barks out a laugh. I mean, you even scolded the mercenary on what she called the king, of all people. Someone has to keep the king in check. Felix snaps. That role does not fall in the hands of the enemy. How noble of you. Sylvain says blandly. Settle down, you two. Dimitri lets out an exasperated sigh. Who should I train with first? Sylvain offers to go first, but Dimitri comes to realize it's only because he wants to start his break before Felix gets to ask for rematch after rematch. But the man does not blame him. On his 7th, or maybe 8th duel with Felix, Dimitri's thoughts start to wander off as he debates too on whether he should just yield against the stubborn shield of Faergus. Oh. Look, Byleth is here. Sylvain says. Dimitri tenses up, searching for the sight of her. But instead, he's greeted with a whack on the head. He grunts in pain, scowling at his opponent. Did you really have to do that, Felix? If you are not going to train seriously with me, I will go and find another sparring partner. Come on, Faye, go easy on him a little. Sylvain grins mischievously. He's just smitten, that's all. I am not dash, Dimitri chokes. Felix rolls his eyes. I suggest you entertain your pursuit of romance elsewhere. You're one to talk. Sylvain counters. I've seen how you look at Annette. Hey, remember that one time she went "You're so cool, Felix." He pumps his fists and pitches up his voice in imitation of the red-headed girl. Now, Dimitri is not the only blushing mess in the training grounds. Keep your mouth shut. But seriously, come on, Dimitri. Sylvain sings, putting down the honorifics, fully intent on teasing now. I mean, didn't you already ask to swoop her away to the kingdom after the war's over? I know you did. Dimitri squirms. It's not like he wanted to be so upfront about it. He just didn't have a moment to spare. Not when Claude had planted a seed of doubt as they trekked to the Valley of Torment. So, Your Majesty, Claude asked, wagging a knowing eyebrow at the king. What do you think of Byleth? This is a sudden question. Dimitri commented, shifting his gaze. Claude chuckled. No, it isn't. I really do need to know. Dimitri looked at him skeptically before he honestly put a thought to the question. The more he reflected on it, however, the more vivid her features painted across his mind. Her teal hair that blended with the grasslands. Her eyes that reminded him of emeralds. Ever since she joined their side, her beauty shone more brightly and ever so evidently compared to when they were enemies. Not that she was never beautiful to begin with, she was perhaps even the most beautiful woman he's ever seen, but Dimitri was not going to admit that in front of Claude, no less. Well, she is an eloquent woman. With nice hair. Nice hair. The man shot him the most deadpan, unamused expression that he had ever worn in years. What's that gotta do with her being a mercenary? Dimitri coughed. I mean. Well. She is undoubtedly a fierce fighter in a league of her own. But then Claude's poker face broke, turning into laughter. I'm just teasing you, Your Majesty. I know that you see what I see. He smirked slyly. I already asked her to come back to Leicester with me after the war. Dimitri swallowed thickly, his heart strangely racing at the revelation. And? He pried. Claude shrugged. She just said she'll think about it. Who knows? All I can do now is be patient. That was why upon their win against the Empire and Byleth had caught him mulling over his thoughts alone, he just had to ask. Would you want to continue your life as a mercenary or perhaps, well, remain in the kingdom? He remembered his hands going clammy and how his heart paced unrhythmically as he asked that question. And he remembered how sad she looked as she gave him her answer. I do not have as much freedom as you believe. What I want does not matter. He's awfully quiet. Sylvain snaps Dimitri out of his thoughts, sticking his tongue out at the king himself. Someone's thinking about a crush. How idiotic. Felix scoffs, but even he observes him amusingly. She's not a crush. Dimitri denies childishly, as if they're back at the academy again. Who isn't? The three men whip their heads at the mercenary standing by the fence, having collected a training sword. "Be Byleth." "Hello." Dmitri stammers, completely forgetting his manners and cursing inwardly to the heavens above. Out of all people, why is it her who had to listen to such an embarrassing conversation? "Hello, Dmitri. And you too, Felix and Sylvain." She greets politely. "I apologize if you heard anything disconcerting." He closes into himself, wishing he can bury himself underneath the training grounds. "Don't worry. I didn't hear a thing," she says with a straight face. If Byleth hadn't greeted them with her question, it would be impossible to tell if she's lying. "Are you finished with your training?" "Yes, we are," Dmitri says quickly. Felix glares at him. "No, we are out." He hisses in pain as Sylvain steps firmly on his friend's foot with a plastered smile. "Yep, we're heading for the cafeteria now." Sylvain grins, putting his arms around his friend's shoulders. "Bye." He drags the two others away, whistling away a tune. As they walk, Felix eyes Dmitri dubiously. "Since when were you guys in first-person terms?" Felix asks. Dmitri blinks. "What?" Felix arches an eyebrow. "She called you Dmitri." Ah. He has no words. In truth, he did not even realize. Felix brushes it off, instead shooting a glare at his other friend. "Can you let go of us now?" As the two only continue to quarrel, Dmitri turns back, seeing that Byleth still stands in place, watching the three walk further and further away. The three finish dining at the cafeteria. Dmitri parts ways with them as he gets ready for the rest of his responsibilities for the day. He leaves the cafeteria, but on his walk, he happens to pass by the training grounds once more, and the mercenary who stands within it is not left unnoticed. He stops in his tracks, watching her as she strikes her sword in a flash while her feet move lightly as they touch the ground. She fights as if it were a dance, graceful, steady, and controlled. She wields the blade like an extension of her body. As if she is, and has always been born to hold a sword. She lowers her blade, taking a breath. Then, she moves her head sideways, catching Dmitri in plain sight. Hesitantly, she lifts up her free hand, waving at him. He smiles and gives her a wave back. Unknowingly, he finds himself approaching her. "I hope I'm not disturbing," Dmitri says. Byleth shakes her head, wiping the sweat from her forehead with her sleeve. "I must say I never fail to be amazed by your swordsmanship. It's no wonder Felix always seeks for you to be in his sparring sessions." She smirks at the comment. "He never does let up. I hope that you can attend our strategy meeting later on this evening. Your insight has been proven valuable in the previous battle. It would be in our best interest to keep you in our main council." "Oh." Byleth's eyebrows raise in surprise. "In any case, you also seem to know a fair amount about that group of dark mages." "Those who slither in the dark," she finishes. "Precisely." He grimaces. "I must admit, there are still a few things that I am confused about. And you seem to know more about them than I do. Feel free to ask me anything." "Right. Thank you." He offers a polite smile. "You see, one of them, Thales, was responsible for the death of my father and many more confidants of the kingdom, which caused a mortifying massacre in Duskur." "So it's true." Byleth's statement is enough to shock Dmitri. "You know about this?" He gasps. "Edelgard claimed it, but I did not know how much of her declaration rung true. And if he is the one who killed your father," he notices how her fists clench up and how her glare hardens with a rare sort of conviction. "Then all of this could have been avoided if we hunted after Thales and the rest of those who slither in the dark in the first place. Are you involved with Thales or this group in some way?" His question laces with a hint of suspicion. He recalls of the image of Nemesis back at the Silver Maiden. He would never forget it after it unlocked surmount grief and pain that he never thought he was holding in. The memory of Nemesis intertwines so closely with Byleth's face as if they overlap with each other like they're one and the same. He cannot help but believe that there is more beneath the surface on their connection. "He has been after me and my loved ones for many years," she tells him. "He seeks vengeance against me." "Vengeance? You must be wondering why my father wants to avoid the church." Particularly, Lady Rhea. Let's just say, I'm connected to her in ways that created a sort of danger. Dmitri ponders for a moment, but his gears immediately go to a stop. His eyes widen dramatically. Gerald said that they had a bit of a history together. She has green hair. Green eyes. Those features are too unique to not put the pieces together. Are you, he sputters, her daughter? Byleth's mouth parts briefly before she lets out a soft giggle. With each beat, he feels the hair on his arms stand up, and his thoughts go out the window. I see why you jumped to that conclusion, but no. She swallows down her laughter. As her smile remains, however, Dmitri recognizes how it is not the same genuine, mesmerizing one she gave him the previous night. This smile hides a sort of sorrow he is unable to comprehend. Lady Rhea bestowed a power upon me when I was born, she says, placing a hand over her chest. One gifted by the goddess. However, in doing so, it has made me a target of those who slither in the dark. They have strived for vengeance against the goddess for millennia, ever since the War of Heroes began and the King of Liberation rampaged against the 10 elites and 4 saints. The King of Liberation, Dmitri interrupts. Do you mean Nemesis? Yes. She nods. He was granted the Crest of Flames by the goddess to protect Fodlan, but as he became corrupted with power, he eventually turned against his promises. Hold on a minute. His fight against Byleth comes back to him. When we fought back at the Silver Maiden, you ignited your crest. You also hold the Crest of Flames, do you not? I do. He props his chin on his fist. I see. It comes to a surprise to him that it is her out of all people that is granted with a power from the goddess. Somebody who seems to be cut off from any religious belief, especially considering her notorious reputation as a mercenary. Perhaps life is truly unpredictable in that way. I hold it now due to Lady Rhea's intervention. And those who slither in the dark do not want this power to be used against them. As a result, they want me gone. Thales is the ringleader to this agenda. He is the reason I strayed far away from home. Byleth's voice softens. Too far? I don't understand. Why would Lady Rhea do such a thing? Her shoulders slump. That, I am not sure. It is quite a complex story, he notes. But knowing that you and Nemesis share the same crest does prove interesting. There are too many questions. Too many answers he must get from this strange group. Not just for himself, but for others who have suffered because of them. Who drowned in deep tragedy and undeserving pain. They deserve retribution. We must take Thales down, Dmitri declares firmly. I will take vengeance for those who suffered from the tragedy of Duscur. Knowing that he is affiliated with such atrocities make him too wicked to be kept alive. The voices loom over him, beckoning for him to give in to his bloodlust. But they cut off into silence when he finds that Byleth does not respond. He takes sight of the small frown that crosses her face. It rests like a neutral expression, but from his distance, he notices the downward curve of her lip as she shifts her eyes to the ground. She purses her lips. Are you suspicious of me? He looks at her, holding her stare. And there it is again. She always stares at him with an intensity of 1,000 suns. She bears in his soul as if she has seen it in a million lifetimes. For once, he does not look away as he answers her. No, Dmitri mutters. No, I am not. Her breath hitches. I'm sure you know this, he says. But we have a fellow mercenary in our ranks that face a similar situation as you. He too wields a unique power. However, unlike you, it still holds much mystery to him. And there is a chance that it is linked to those who slither in the dark. But that does not mean I view him as an enemy. I have seen where his heart lies and his genuine care to protect his friends. So, to me, it matters not where the power comes from. He has my trust and nothing at all will change that. He smiles at her reassuringly. The same applies to you. Of course, at first, I had my reservations. After all, you were hired by the Empire for an extended amount of time. Despite that, you have shown your kind nature towards the kingdom even before you surrendered. You spared many of their lives, and most of all, you even saved Ingrid from the brink of death. He knows that his face grows warm, but his eyes remain on hers, refusing to relent to a timidity unbecoming of a king. I need you to know how truly grateful I am that you are by our side, Byleth. She gapes at him as still as a statue, and there is nothing exchanged between them except for the gaze that they share. Now, as she smiles with pink dusted across her cheeks, he feels as if the summer of the war has already passed, leading on to the new spring. If he had any inkling of suspicion against her, it is washed away completely now, like waves washing away his writings of fear from sand. A demon. That was what most people called her. She is anything but. Having gone only past half of his duties required for the day, he remains restless in the command center as he glues himself at the war map splayed across the table. You must not stare so hard at that, Your Majesty. Rodrigue says. It will hurt your eyesight. He finally looks up from the map, blinking away the dryness from his eyes. When he looks out at the window, the sun is already beginning to set. You must not worry about such things, Rodrigue. He chuckles. We are approaching the end of this war, and it's imperative that our strategy secures an inarguable win against the Empire. It will. However, it will not help if you do not rest once in a while. He sighs, leaning against his chair, relaxing his eyes. There is no time to rest. We still have yet to do after this war. So many more enemies to face. So much damage to restore. It will indeed be a trying journey, but I have no doubt that you will lead the kingdom to a bright future. Ah. Dimitri's eyes open from Rodrigue's interjection. That reminds me. We're soon going to need to find the next queen. Dimitri jolts up on his seat. I beg your pardon. The nobles across Faerghus have started to talk. Rodrigue explains. With peace soon approaching, they are growing more and more impatient. They insist to speed up in restoring the kingdom back to normal as soon as we claim Garreg Mach. Rodrigue crunches up his nose. They are quite the nag, but they do have a point. The war has created far too much damage for our people. They have grown impoverished, and their livelihoods have deteriorated. Having a queen take the throne by your side will be important as we work on kingdom reparations. Least of all, an heir. Rodrigue eyes Dimitri in surprise as he drags on his silence. Surely, you must be aware that this has always been the plan regardless, Your Majesty. He clears his throat. I suppose. My apologies. Rodrigue gives him a reassuring smile. Perhaps we have jumped into this topic too suddenly. But it is best for you to keep it in mind. Choosing a queen is no easy task, after all. How? Dimitri stammers about, blinking in disbelief. How do I even go about this? Well, we usually have to consider multiple factors. Rodrigue informs. House standing, crest, relations within the kingdom. But most of all, character. Dimitri winces. I agree with the latter, but are the first points you mentioned necessary? They are rather shallow criteria to consider. I do not think these will matter should I be with somebody I love, will it? Is there somebody that you love? Rodrigue asks, eyes widened with intrigue. Even Dimitri himself does not know why he asked that question. After all, he has never dawdled in the idea of romance, let alone thought of a future that he could promise to someone. Well, no, his voice traces off. But a small part of him sits uncomfortably as he speaks that answer. Rodrigue stares at him for a moment before he hums sympathetically. As a king, your union holds a different kind of weight than a regular marriage. The role of a queen goes beyond than just being your wife. He explains. The people will observe your union as an example. The queen that will stand by your side will be a premonition of the future that you wish to build. Sometimes, who you eventually intend to betroth is not as simple as a story of love at first sight. The love is built as you build the kingdom together. That was the case for your father and birth mother. Although his memory has grown vague, Dimitri still barely remembers how his father spoke fondly of his birth mother. He knew, in the fogginess of his mind, that there was love shared between the two, whatever that may mean. He wonders if he will ever be able to find that love. And as he does so, a flicker of green hair flashes through his mind, as gently as the breeze that sways during the great tree moon. Of course, love is an important part in a union. Rodrigue continues. And I wish that you will be lucky enough to find it. Then his face grows serious, sending him a silent message through his gaze. However, you must tread carefully, as that alone may not be enough. The person you will partner yourself with must be one who carries the way of the kingdom and the values it has upheld for centuries. Who understands the diplomacy and history of our land. These qualities are important should you want to lift the kingdom back up again. Rodrigue's fond smile returns with a shake of his head. I do not want to catch you by surprise by this news. Do take your time to consider more deeply on what matters to you. Before Dmitri can entertain the growing thoughts in his head, a kingdom soldier intrudes their conversation. Your Majesty, there's an emergency. The soldier declares in alarm. What is the matter? There has been a sudden cluster of soldiers within camp that fell unconscious. He reports. Unconscious? Rodrigue repeats, straightening up. Have they fallen ill? It is still uncertain. Witnesses have said they just collapsed on the ground around the camp. This is bad if they are soldiers among our main units. Who have been reported? They are indeed from our main units and hold the same profile. They are all surrenders from the Empire. You don't mean Dmitri gawks. The soldier nods with an uneasy frown. The Black Eagles. Chapter 20. The mercenaries were assigned a mission in the middle of the night after rumors spread of a nearby Imperial ambush. It was a quick job, in Byleth's opinion. She must admit, she felt a twinge of pity at just how much the Empire's strength had deteriorated ever since her band betrayed them. But even so, her hope overrode any sense of pity she was able to give as the kingdom's future looked brighter. Byleth returns to the base camp with the mercenary band early in the morning when the sun still barely peeked out of the horizon. As she passes by the merchants, she sees Dmitri from the distance, having left the command center. She's about to approach him but stops when she sees the purple-haired mercenary that stands by his side, his laugh booming all the way to Byleth's ears. There is something that twists in Byleth's stomach and prickles her skin. She quickly shakes the feeling away, diverting her direction down to the river just outside of the camp gates. When she arrives, she removes her cloak and takes a seat by the edge of the river, listening to the way the water peacefully runs. She submerges the cloak in it, and the water reddens from the blood stains she washes out. She scrubs and scrubs, forcing any thought in her head away. Hey, I was looking for you. Her scrubbing comes to a halt. She turns to see Geralt walking over to her. Didn't think I'd find you down by the river. He observes the garment that's still soaked in water. That's an awful lot of blood on your cloak. I thought soaking it in the water would help get it out. Byleth says, resuming her scrubbing. I don't know, that fight went on for a while. And blood doesn't come out so easily, even if you start washing it right away. If you ask me, it's more trouble than it's worth. You have another one, right? I do. She nods. But I'd still like to use this one if I can. Geralt sighs, combing his fingers through his hair. He lets on a silence for too long. She stops again. Something wrong? She asks. He freezes for a moment. Oh, I'm sorry. It's just, you reminded me of Citrai, of your mother. Back when we first met. This fully intrigues her now and she takes the cloak out of the water, laying it by her side. How so? There was this one time when she was trying really hard to get some stains out of a handkerchief. He rants. She had your same quiet composure and everything. And when I asked her if she had another one, you know what she told me? He chuckles. She just turned and said, if I can still use this one, I'd rather not throw it away. Byleth props her head on her fist. Well, that's not exactly the same. Maybe not. But I still see so much of her in you. When I was first getting to know her, I never saw her laugh or cry. Just like someone else I could mention. She absorbs the story, trying to imagine what her mother even looked like. You know, she starts. You never really used to talk about her, but you've been doing it a lot lately. Why is that? Oh, I don't know. He exhales wearily. Maybe I'm feeling a little regret for dragging you into the mercenary life. Byleth's jaw tightens at his confession. She never knew her father to have such regrets. You've never had a place to call home, Geralt says. And you don't have any friends your age. And it's been one bloody battle after another since this war broke out. If she were still alive, your life would be entirely different. You'd be with her, and things would be peaceful. I don't regret my life here with you. Byleth replies immediately. I might not have a home or friends, but you've always been there for me. Living by the sword suits me just fine. And I've had no shortage of allies. She frowns deeply. So. Her chest tightens at how her father remains with his conflicted expression. The thought of her father questioning the way he raised her saddens her. She doesn't think he did a bad job, considering the circumstances they were put in. She doesn't want him questioning his role as her father. You're right. There's no cause for regrets. Gerald shrugs, before laughing half-heartedly. You really are just like her though. You know that. He stretches his body. Well, I won't keep you here listening to my stories all day long. Gotta go with some mercenaries to patrol the outskirts of the camp for a bit. It's that mercenaries' orders. We'll be back for lunch. He grins. See ya. She nods a farewell, her gaze lingering behind him as he walks away. Her eyes stare blankly at the riverbank, wondering just much of a difficult time her father had in raising her in a dangerous lifestyle such as this. Going day by day not knowing if your child would survive. You can't die before me, kid. He had told her. Even in its selfishness, she understands how the loss of a child brings overwhelming anguish. With its absence, a parent loses their purpose and may even lose their way. She puts her cloak back in the water, and she scrubs and scrubs. Byleth had busied herself around camp all day, spending most of her time in the training grounds. Dimitri had stopped by briefly to ask her about those who slither in the dark, and bit by bit, she was able to compile some clues. From the confirmation of Thal's role on the death of Dimitri's father to Dimitri's mention of Nemesis. It was strange for him to point it out specifically. But the more she thinks about it, perhaps there is a lead in knowing that she shares the same crest as the King of Liberation. But amongst it all, her body eases after Dimitri's declaration of his trust. It relaxes the nerves in her body for a moment, allowing her to train with more concentration. His trust is enough for her to regain her determination to start over. To rebuild the scale that she had once broken. Hey, Shay swings by, interrupting her during her training break. She raises her eyebrows in greeting as she continues to drink water from her flask. He takes a training sword. Hope you are not tired from your training. I've been wanting to spar with you. Never had the chance since I ran off on your first day. He frowns sheepishly. Sorry about that, by the way. That's okay. She puts down her flask, picking her sword back up. I've been wanting to see how you fare without having to hold back. He smirks at that. Well, then how about we let loose our power a little bit? That intrigues Byleth. She's never had a friendly match with an Agarthan. Or a descendant of the Agarthans. At least, that's what she believes him to be. Interesting proposal. Byleth says. All right. He walks further away from her, staying in position. You ready for this? Shay focuses in on her. Come at me. She declares, grounding her stance. No hesitation. Shay roars as he dashes to strike her first. Their blades blur in the air as they swing rapidly against each other. With all of Byleth's dirty tricks to trip him or slash the gravel to distort his vision, Shay manages to effortlessly dodge them. As mercenaries, they're both able to sniff out any surprise attacks that a knight may struggle foreseeing. Shay unleashes his power, summoning a new sword with his free hand. Byleth activates her own in response exhilaratingly. She slows down time just a bit to help her close the gap and find his blind spots. She reaches behind him, ready to strike. But Shay reacts on time, spinning abruptly to block her sword with his own two blades. But his footing remains imbalanced, which allows Byleth to sweep him off his feet with ease. Shay grunts as he falls to the ground. Byleth points the blade to his face, and the man sighs, raising his hands in defeat. You actually managed to dodge that, Byleth nods in approval, withdrawing her sword. Not sure dodge is the word I'd use. He frowns, getting up from the ground clumsily. I just let my power loose without even thinking. Guess I'm still no match for you. Give yourself a little credit. It took everything I had to keep up. If you could avoid an attack like that, then you're easily on par with me. But you barely even used your power. He says exasperatedly. You know, the one that throws off your enemy's perception or whatever. I wouldn't have stood a chance if you hit me with that. So you've noticed it? She confirms. How could I not? We've fought about 1,000,000 times by now. Your power's not exactly visible, so it's definitely tougher to catch onto than mine. But I've experienced your kind of beatdown firsthand, so I'm painfully aware of the damage you can inflict. Sorry about that. I couldn't afford to pull any punches back then. It's fine. He waves his hand dismissively. Water under the bridge. So, have you had your power for long? Where'd you learn it? I was kinda wondering if I could pick it up myself. I only became aware of it when I was fighting hard against you. She recalls the eerie feeling of Suthi's taking over her body in a moment of weakness when he had slain her father. It was when the power finally awakened within her, and shortly afterward, Suthi's had finally granted her the use of the divine pulse. But I don't think it's something a person can learn. She continues. Even I barely understand how it works. Right, gotcha. Sounds like we're in the same boat, then. Yes, just two strange people with even stranger powers. She concludes. And I'm not only talking about your sword. She pauses for a while, remembering yet another event that occurred in Alel with the vortex that cracked the sky. And the ghost with the menacing eyes. When that vision disappeared, Shay's face turned as pale as snow, as if the life fully drained out of his face. After that battle, he kept to himself, brows arched in frustration as he pondered deeply and silently. She can only wonder. Do you ever feel like there's some sort of mysterious presence within you? His jaw tightens. Oh, It's just that sometimes it's hard to tell what you're thinking. Like you get distracted by something from time to time. Almost like you're talking to someone else, inside your head. He lowers his sword, fidgeting with his ear. Are you asking because that's what happens to you? Byleth blinks, shaking her head a bit too quickly. No, it was just something I noticed. I simply thought I'd ask. The awkward silence drags on, so Shay just shrugs it off. If you say so. Suddenly, they hear a scream from afar. Byleth and Shay stop what they're doing, looking at where the sound came from. Outside of the training grounds, just by the recreation quarters, a crowd of people huddles around, chattering in panic. The two mercenaries exchange looks, rushing to the scene. Byleth pushes her way through the crowd. She can only gasp at what she sees. Petra and Dorothea lay on the ground, still and unconscious. Their faces are pale. Too pale. As if they're dead. Quickly, Byleth kneels by them, feeling their pulse. Despite their beating, they both are as cold as ice. They're still alive. Byleth picks Petra up from the ground. We need to bring them to the infirmary quickly. On it. Shay carries Dorothea next. They make a beeline to the infirmary, where more chatter swirls about. He must be overworked. A healer gasps. Overworked. He's so cold, he might even be dying. Dying. Byleth stills at the word. As the healers gather to carry the body from the ground, it is revealed to be Linhard, with his eyes open yet void of any life. Petra. Dorothea. Linhard. Fear overcomes Byleth at their strikingly familiar state, and her mind starts to put the pieces together. She quickly lays Petra on one of the vacant beds. There's more of them. Byleth tells Shay shakily. More. Shay widens his eyes. She nods, looking at the healers. Please tend to them. We have to go. She sprints out of the infirmary in haste, with Shay following suite. Byleth, you know what's going on? He asks urgently. Maybe. She replies. I just hope I'm not right. She rushes to the shed, knocking harshly on the door. Bernadetta, she calls. There's no response, so she knocks again. Bernadetta. Silence. Adrenaline shoots up as Byleth breaks open the door. When she steps in the shed, it's as she expected. Bernadetta lays still on the ground, as white as a ghost. No, Byleth whispers, going on her knees. Just what is going on? Shay gasps. How could this happen? Byleth grips on her tights. They are as lifeless as they were back then when they were slain during the war. Whether they were shot, pierced through, or blasted upon, the stillness of their bodies and hollowed eyes were always the same. Shay, bring her back to the infirmary. Then I need you to search for the others. The others? Shay gawks. Just how many are there? Look for Jiritsa. Everyone from the Empire should be affected. And dash. She freezes, clutching her hair as the realization strikes her. It won't just the Black Eagles. Some of the knights and mercenaries too. Byleth stands up, vividly thinking of one knight and one mercenary in particular. I'll explain everything later. Right now, we have to move. She sprints away, beginning her search around the camp. The soldiers look at her in confusion as she runs past them in panic, as if she's preparing for an incoming attack. Her eyes scan around wildly in search for a man with long, raven hair. She can just imagine Rodrigue sprawled across the floor as lifeless as the rest of them, and how Dimitri and Felix would scream his name, fearing for the loss of their father. And what of her own father? Byleth shakes away the thought for now. She needs to make sure that Dimitri and Felix are okay. So she sticks to that lead, finding the two men, hoping to find Rodrigue with either of them. She heads toward the command center, where she knows Dimitri often has his counsel. And soon enough, she spots him rushing out in haste. Right behind him is an alarmed, and very much alive, Rodrigue. Dimitri! She calls. Rodrigue. The two turn to her. Byleth. Dimitri notices her urgency. I heard that the Black Eagles fell unconscious. They're in the infirmary. She tells them. Shay must be with them right now. Follow me. She leads them there, where the healers busy themselves over the stretch of beds that are occupied by the Black Eagles. It bustles with faith magic and stressed murmurs within the staff that tends to their unconsciousness. Next to Jiritsa's bedside, Mercedes weeps, holding onto her brother's hand and murmuring quiet prayers to the goddess. Shay rubs his face, bewildered by it all. He's all I could find. He tells Byleth. Everywhere else round the camp seems normal. Just how could this happen? Rodrigue's brows pull together in puzzlement. But she scans around the room, adrenaline shooting up her body once again. This isn't everyone. She says, searching desperately for a sturdy man with bulky gear, either unconscious or roaming around with life. But there is none. Her heart drops to her stomach. Gotta go with some mercenaries to patrol the outskirts of the camp for a bit. It's that mercenaries' orders. We'll be back for lunch. It's way past lunch. Byleth's face blanches. She just imagines him laying lifeless outside of the camp and the mercenaries screaming out his name in panic. My father, she mumbles. He's not here. I dispatched him to a nearby village just by the riverbank to guide some merchants in collecting supplies. Shay says. It's not that far. Just a 5-minute walk or less. She holds on to the fabric of her coat so tightly that her knuckles turn white. Byleth? Shay asks. She doesn't respond. Not when she imagines his lifeless body being returned to her, all limp and still. A state of his that she's seen more times than she should be able to count. She takes a deep breath in. And another deep breath out. She does it again. And again. But the burning sensation in her chest does not ease, nor does her lightheadedness at the thought of losing her father again. Should she look for him? She's not brave enough to find the answer. Would she be greeted with his nonchalant grin or his stone-cold body? Just what should she do? Suddenly, someone takes a hold of her hand. She looks up at Dimitri, whose eyes meet hers. He wears that familiar look of determination, one he wears whenever he needs to overcome a crossroads. Let's go find him. He tells her softly. He shouldn't be far. Her lips quiver, unable to let out any words in fear of choking out a whimper. She lets herself be taken away as Dimitri's hand tightens comfortingly around hers, guiding her out of the infirmary toward the camp gates. The walk outside of the camp is heavy with silence except for the crunching of the leaves below their feet. Her eyes stay planted on the ground, afraid of what she might see if she looks ahead. Everything will be fine, Byleth. Her eyes shoot up at his, which are softened with sincerity. If something had happened to your father, I'm sure the mercenaries will come running. We can take this silence as good news. She croaks out. He's a strong man. I see where you got your strength from. He smiles kindly at her. So have faith. His hand squeezes hers, channeling all his warmth into her. As she stares down at their hands intertwined together, she feels the knots in her stomach loosen themselves just a little bit. Then hollers are heard from afar. Dimitri and Byleth turn to the sound, and they see a group of jolly mercenaries poking fun at each other, all being led by a rather exasperated man. As they approach, Geralt's eyes meet theirs. Kid? Your Majesty? What are you two doing here? Then his eyes land lower, noticing their interlocked hands. His eyebrows raise exaggeratedly high at the sight. Before Dimitri can even say anything, Byleth lets go of his hand and stomps angrily at the man. Some of the Imperial soldiers fell unconscious around camp. Byleth starts. Okay. He gawks. Dorothea. Petra. Bernadetta. Linhard. Juritsa. All of them. She balls her hands into fists. They look like they're dead. Realization washes over her father's face more and more as the names tumble out of her mouth, fully processing the information now. He swallows thickly. Are they? No, but they look like it. She snaps harshly. The healers are looking after them for now. Her father sighs softly. Look, kid, I'm sorry I made you worry. I know I'm late. Her voice thickens as her emotions pour out into her words. We couldn't find you anywhere. Kid dash. You promised me. I won't act recklessly on the battlefield, all right? I'll make sure that I'll stay with you for as long as I can. Tears prickle the corners of her eyes, and she can care less about the mercenaries that stare at her dumbfoundedly for bearing such raw emotion, something she never did in front of them. I know. Geralt brings her head to his chest like he's handling a baby. He pats her back in reassurance. As soon as she is enveloped in his warmth, the tears streak down her face. You promised. She repeats again, hiccuping out her quiet sob. I know. He whispers again. They return to the infirmary back at the camp, and Geralt is horrified at what he sees. To think that this could have happened in such short time. He grimaces. What a mess. Their breathing and heartbeats are regular. And I see no trace of poison or illness in their bodies. Mercedes explains despite her drained tone. Even still, their blood is too cold. I've never seen a condition like this before. Could this be some sort of spell? Rodrigue suggests, stroking his chin. Constance cause. Even the darkest of spells could be found on one's body and it could be very much broken. Then a spy. Dimitri offers. I doubt a spy would target former Imperial soldiers. Shay frowns, then looks at Byleth. Say, you said you might know what's going on, right? All heads turn her direction. Byleth remembers how she saw a vision of clashing against her husband. Suthies had told her that time has converged temporarily in that moment. What if time is converging once again? The vortex. The mysterious figure. And now this. Suthies must be telling her something. These events are too bizarre to simply brush aside. It's a hunch. Byleth says. But I believe it's the bidding of those who slither in the dark. Them again. Dimitri glares. Shay winces. But, how could they even be capable of this sort of thing? Agarthans have a dark history of fiddling with the lives of humans to achieve their agenda. They have done crest experimentations and taken over humans as hosts for bodies to rule the land. All of this is to seek vengeance against the goddess and the world that she has created. To seek vengeance against the goddess and the world that she has created. Shay repeats. Now that I think about it, this rings familiar. What does? Shay looks at Dimitri. Hey, do you remember that dream I told you I had? The one with Nemesis and the Saints. Yeah, well, there was that guy who led the war against the Saints. This agenda you're talking about sounds a lot like what he had in mind. What's his name? Byleth asks. Lord Epimenides. As soon as the name rolls out of Shay's tongue, time stands still. The world around her freezes, with Dimitri, Shay and the others standing in place, not moving a single muscle. Her surroundings turn purple until it eventually fades away, replacing itself with the familiar view of Suthi's domain. Ah, so that well proved useful after all. My memory is as clear as day. You're awake, Byleth says. She looks up at Suthi's, who sits on her throne, engrossed with the chaos that swirls above them. The sky is cracked and lights of purple seep through it. What's going on? Byleth asks in alarm, but Suthi's seems unfazed as she moves her gaze down to her vessel. I shall tell you a story and you must listen, she says curtly. In the beginning, amid the great cloudless ocean, Fodlan came to be. Upon my hand, I breathed life into this world and many more beyond that stretch throughout the infinity of the universe. By the grace of my divine protection, humanity thrived. Until darkness descended into the universe that devoured the earth, desecrated the heavens, and threw the world into chaos. Suthi's waves her fingers, and silhouettes of light appear in between them, revealing a wide view of a city. This was from the creation of the ancient civilization known as Agartha. Suthi's presence. Its very existence comes to deny my power. The silhouettes of light morph and shape into a group of indecipherable people of all shapes and sizes. To face this evil force, I created a new well of power for the humans I have chosen with my sacred blood, allowing them to wield mystical weapons that they may prevail against the darkness. Suthi's explains. These souls, buoyed by their divine gifts, conquered the evil ones. You mortals will come to know them as the heroes. The goddess look turns scornful. However, I dare say granting them with such long lives was a fatal error. For the descendants of the heroes sought their ancestors' power, and thusly their blood. In time, they amassed crests, relics, land, and wealth, using all to set the land aflame with war. My power ultimately became a tool of destruction, all because of the greed of humanity. The silhouettes shift once again, turning into people fighting with each other. And that was when the Agarthans saw their time to strike. By that time, the heroes have been corrupted, being used as pawns in their vengeance against me. And thus, a new war began. One led by a mortal that dared to deny my power. To deny my very existence, in order to replace me as the beholder of space and time. She leans forward on her throne, fully intent on engaging Byleth with her story. Do you want to know his name? Byleth ponders for a moment, remembering the name that Shay had uttered. Lord Epimenides. Suthi's nods, fuming in rage. I exist in the present, past, and the future. I see all. I hear all. I receive all. And that mortal general desired desperately to replace me. He dared challenge me for the role of eternity incarnate. By then, I knew I had no faith in humanity any longer. So, I relied on my children to bridge between the lands above and below and bring my blessings of peace to all. Lady Rhea is one of them. Byleth confirms. Saint Ceros. Suthi's smile oozes with pride. Even now, I sense her safeguarding the worlds from each other. What do you mean? Your worlds are not supposed to be aware of each other. Worlds within the plane of the universe must be kept separate. Mortals are incapable of living in two worlds at once, unlike you, who wields my power. The dots connect in Byleth's head. That's why they're unconscious. Indeed. Some were fortunate enough to be unaffected for now by such danger. Suthi's picks up a shard floating from the sky, examining it in her hand. Your original world and the one that you roam on now are starting to meld together. However, this may bring destruction of your worlds alike. If that comes about, you will cease to exist as well. How can we stop it? You must eliminate this Lord Epimenides. Suthi's scowls, looking up at the shattered sky. He attempts to break the barriers of time and space to destroy the worlds where you exist. Where I exist. I have sealed the barrier between the two worlds for now. But if I must speak the truth, I do not know how long this will take hold. The darkness has grown more persistent. She stands up from her throne, walking down the steps deliberately and profoundly. His defeat, you must return home for the worlds to regain balance and for the barrier to be sealed. In doing so, you will also make those who do not belong in this world perish. Thales and those of the like will be no more. You must accomplish this task before the darkness breaks the barrier once more. Her glare hardens. We have only little time left to spare. The darkness must be slain. Suthis emits a ray of blinding light from her palms. In the blink of an eye, Byleth returns to the infirmary, where time resumes, with Shay and Dimitri conversing amongst themselves. Groans are suddenly heard from the beds. They all turn abruptly at the sound, seeing how the Black Eagles shift uncomfortably. They're awake. Shay gasps. The healers rush over to examine them. They're burning up all of a sudden. Mercedes notes, touching her brother's forehead. Their state looks much better than before. Despite their shallow breathing and creased brows, the color has returned to their faces, looking very much alive. What is happening all of a sudden? Dimitri scratches his head. Byleth observes the scene, drowned by the thoughts in her head. Was this your doing? She asks Suthis. Who else could it be? The goddess counters. However, their state is still very much weakened. I doubt they will recover soon. If at all. Byleth only frowns at the bleak news. It is relieving indeed that they have stirred awake. Rodrigue exhales in relief. We must ensure that they have a speedy recovery. I will remain with them, Mercedes says. As will I. Constance declares proudly. My powers do not only carry destruction, but the protection of life. Allow me as well. Byleth's eyes remain on the Black Eagles. This is the least I can do. For she has hurt them once again. She still has many sins to atone for. Byleth remains in the infirmary, having insisted for Mercedes and Constance to get some rest. She looks after the Black Eagles alone as they remain in deep sleep. Their breathing has become more even, and their faces do not look as tormented as before. After a while, Linhard groans. His eyes groggily open, blinking a few times as he takes in his surroundings. Where am I? He whispers. In the infirmary. Byleth responds. How are you feeling? Terrible. His gaze remains up at the ceiling. I feel like I'm being seared on a frying pan. That's a specific comparison. She soaks a towel in water and squeezes it before placing it over his forehead. You should go back to sleep. It's a bit hard to. I felt like I died. He glances at her without so much as turning his head. So that must be how eternal sleep feels. Like a bunch of nothing. It's very forgettable, if you ask me. He slowly closes his eyes again. Who knew it could put so much into perspective? Maybe it's for the best I did not wake up at all. Byleth frowns. Don't say that. I know you must think it's not so bad over here. He says with a long sigh. But it's different for me, as someone who came from the Empire. Did you know what I had to do as a traitor of my own home? Did you know what I had to negotiate in front of my father? And now, I have to follow them to Burgundy, where we'll come across my father who will defend the kingdom from passing. And Caspar will be there too. He will be too stubborn to surrender to the likes of the kingdom. That's just how he is. I know what that entails. You will make me kill him. Nobody is asking you to kill him. Byleth reassures softly. He places an arm over his eyes. Can I ask you something, mercenary? You told me to live for what I believe in. And I want to do that at least for once. What is it? If I am to recover, allow me to withdraw from this battle. Linhard's voice trembles. Or is the kingdom so cruel that I will have to face my own father and the man that I love? Byleth stays quiet, stunned, yet heartbroken at the man's confession. Her gaze softens, nodding despite how he does not look at her. All right. She whispers. He lets out a relieved, broken laughter. It's strange. I never thought I would be one who wished to have fought for the Empire till my last dying breath. The tears trickle down his face while he sniffles quietly under the somber silence. Byleth quietly excuses herself from the infirmary, giving him his privacy. As she passes by one of the cots outside, she spots a single lit-up candle through the window. The flame reveals the sliver of blonde hair from the person who still stays awake. Byleth exhales softly. There's no bothering in asking him to sleep. Instead, she heads for the kitchen, where she knows she can find something that can make him do so. She gets some dried chamomile from one of the jars on the cupboard and brews a pot of tea. Its soothing scent allows her to reminisce on the days where she would do this for her husband. There were nights that he would miss out on sleep due to lately informed paperwork or impromptu meetings. There were also nights that he would miss out on sleep simply because he just couldn't. Because the nightmares were there to haunt them. So during these nights, Byleth would brew tea for him in the kitchen, smelling the scent of chamomile that also brought her a kind of comfort. And in those nights, sleep came to him more easily. Even if just by a little bit. She walks back to the building with the pot and cups in hand, giving a soft knock on the door. Dmitri turns back at the sound. Byleth. His voice is soft, careful not to wake up anybody nearby. What are you doing here? I can ask you the same thing. She walks over to him, placing the pot in a teacup on the desk. Some chamomile tea for His Majesty. You didn't have to. He smiles at her. Thank you. He pours the tea into the cup and inhales its calming scent. How comforting. His shoulders start to relax as he takes a sip. She takes a seat next to him, joining him under the dim lighting of the candle. In the dark room, the light only reveals the space that the both of them share. Byleth can closely watch how the folds on his face ease the more he drinks. She absorbs the sight of him, sitting peacefully as he sips on his tea. She always enjoyed watching him when he enjoys his solitude like this. This is really kind of you. He beams at her. I'm happy to help. She says, pouring the tea into a cup of her own. How are the Black Eagles? Dmitri asks, leaning back on his chair, breaking away from whatever he was reading for the moment. Linhard woke up. She frowns. I know this is personal, but I would like to ask if we could excuse all of them from the next battle. It will do no good, considering their condition. Of course, I agree with you on that. He leans against his hand on the desk. I see how much you look after them. It is hard for them to adapt, considering their former allegiance to the Empire. I just want to make sure that they feel safe here. And that they still have a future. We will make it so, I assure you. He says. The same applies to you. Byleth smiles briefly at that. I would also like to apologize for this afternoon. My emotions got the best of me. But I also want you to know how grateful I am that you made me feel safe. It's nothing, really. A dust of pink sweeps over Dmitri's cheek. And there is no need to apologize either. It is no sign of weakness to convey your emotions on your sleeve. I'd like to believe it is a source of strength. And I know how much you care about your father. I too cared deeply about mine. His smile falters. My father was the strongest man I knew. Someone I loved and admired deeply. That day, he was killed before my eyes. His head severed clean off. I couldn't save him. So now, I must ensure that he has no regrets. That is my duty as his son. It's a heavy burden, but accepting it gave me the strength to pick myself up off the ground and start moving again. Start living again. And that continues on until this day as the king of Faerghus. He chuckles lightly, shaking his head. My apologies. I went on a tangent, didn't I? Not at all. Byleth smiles empathetically. What you're doing for the people you love. I admire you for that. She shifts her gaze for a moment, a question swirling in her head. Is that why you allowed everyone to yield? The Black Eagles. The Ashen Wolves. There have been so many surrenders from the opposing side. Why did you spare them? If I am to give you a typical answer, it's simply because I found value in their strength. They were formidable opponents when they served the Empire. But there is more to it than that. I also wanted to see what it would be like to give them a second chance. I believe it could give the people hope that everyone can redeem themselves. That is what could bring about a brighter and better Fodlan. A second chance, Byleth murmurs. So that was the case for Miklon as well. Well, yes. Dmitri widens his eyes. It's a noble mission. What you're doing. It is barely anything. I simply do what I must for the kingdom. Right. She whispers. Under the candlelight, Byleth clearly sees the weariness on Dmitri's face. But even so, he beams with confidence, sitting and talking about the pains of his past with more ease. There is still grief in his words, she is aware, but he talks as if he is willing to let go of the past. He has spoken in such a way even after he discovered Thales was the one who murdered his father. Dmitri has always been like this, putting the betterment of his people over his own pain. But there is something in this reality, Byleth notices, that allowed him to put that pain aside earlier, removing any roadblocks that could have triggered his vengeance and bloodlust. This world has avoided any deaths that could pile on his back. Rodrigue lives. And many more have survived despite the calamities of the war. In this world, he did not have to face so much pain. So much betrayal. And it makes a question hang in the air. Dmitri, she begins. I would like to ask you something. What is it? She gazes at him, intent on observing him carefully as he answers. Are you happy? Happy? He blinks in confusion. That's a rather interesting question. Nobody's ever asked me that. He stays silent for a long time, deeply pondering the question. I believe I can't answer that yet. Is the answer he finally settles on. At least, not until after the war. There is still so much suffering, too much suffering amongst my people for me to be selfish enough to be happy. Then he chuckles. And I'm not sure I'll ever be. Happiness is such a foreign concept to me. Byleth listens quietly, nodding at his answer. She expected him to answer her question in a way that frames his answer on the behalf of his people. He has always been selfless in that way. But even still. I think you will find it here. She smiles, despite the twinge of sadness in her chest. After all, she has something to compare it to. You have friends. You have Rodrigue. She says. They are the new family that you have built for yourself. There are new people you can build happiness with, Dmitri. Happiness, that's something that you deserve. And you will find it. Byleth, he gapes at her in stupor. After all, he has done it once before. He can do it again. Especially in this world, where Dmitri is fortunate enough to be blessed with a reality that is untainted with deaths and a bloody path. Her world was not that kind. She knows of Dmitri's suffering, and how cruel the path was in which he walked. It took him longer to reach a point of happiness. And even with that happiness, his past remains through the nightmares that haunt him. And as he approaches the future with her, she has only made the trek to that peace and happiness he so desires longer than it needs to be. Looking at this Dmitri now, she can't help but feel guilt overwhelm her. If things have changed, perhaps her husband would have reached this point earlier. That's why she needs to fix things. She's made a promise to herself on what she would do upon returning home. She will redeem herself and help him rebuild Fodlan in the way it needs to be. She has let him down for far too long. It may be too late. But she holds on to the hope that she can help her own world look a little more like this reality. One without so much hatred and loss. Dmitri clears his throat. How about you? Me. Are you happy? He looks at her abashedly. She tenses up at the question and her smile fades away. I'm the same as you. She answers. I can only answer that when I return home to the one that I love. Your home. You mentioned this once. This person that you love. Is it your mother? She shakes her head. My mother passed away when I was born. Oh, he frowns. I'm sorry to hear that. It's all right. She says. I do not have much family, except for my father. And as she says that, she wonders just what would happen to him once she returns to her own world. Will she feel his absence again? The thought of it just makes the grief that she thought has been dried up bleed out of her in its rawest form. But if it's not your family, then who else? The room turns completely silent. Suddenly, the air shifts, any sign of comfort gone. Dmitri blinks out of his daze, sitting away from her now. Dmitri. She watches how he looks at her in shock, as if she had just blasted a spell on his face. Byleth, he sputters. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. She opens her mouth to say something, quickly realizing the absurd misunderstanding, but he abruptly stands up from his seat. I have to go. He glances at her briefly before turning on his heel, scurrying away. Byleth is left alone in the room, and the last bits of life on the candle flame dies out. Check the description for the links to the author.